All right. It says we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever live episode of the Bearded Gear podcast. Timing worked out perfectly this morning because today's guest is Metal Complex, and he likes to do these in the morning, which is perfect because I usually do them at night, and it's probably better that I do it in the morning. I'll have a little more clarity. But we decided to record this right at 9, which is typically when I put these live anyways, is on Wednesday mornings at 9 PST. So we're going ahead and we're doing it. I've got Metal Complex on today. I'm sure if any of you are not familiar with him and you're familiar with me, then that's an odd way that happened. But we're here and we're chatting today. We were talking energy drinks before we got started, and we kind of need to finish that. So you're going to have to bear with us. But Metal Complex, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great. We were talking about he has a better, probably, as far as like extended energy, he drinks a tea that's makes you, a little bit more easy to understand. Sentence fluency is probably a little better over the course of 2 hours than hammering a monster, which is what I'm going to do during this live stream.
And I've been there plenty of times. Like, don't get me wrong, even still, I'll pound energy drinks every now and then, especially if I'm doing like a through the night drive or whatever. On our last trip back from Utah, I started with a Red Bull, and then I had a second Red Bull, and then it was like a 10+ hour drive. Plus my kid was sick. She was like throwing up in a bowl in the back seat. It was gnarly. Yeah. And so then after 2 Red Bulls, I had a 5-hour energy. And then that started to wear off right at the very end. So I pounded another Red Bull, and that got me home. But then I couldn't fall asleep once I got home at like dawn for a couple hours. It was brutal.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But
that's
usually
a lot of gasoline, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Usually yerba mate is like my go-to, but it's like it's a more stable level energy that doesn't take you as high, but it also like lasts a little more evenly and you don't crash at the end. So that's why I like it.
I'm gonna have to try that. I try like my mornings, I kind of record, get built up, and then I try to go like when I feel like it's a good time. Then I'll go exercise, and then it's like in the afternoon for sure. But that's cool. It gives me something else to try here, in the very near future.
Yep, absolutely. And if you can't find it wherever you live, I'll send you some. You let me know.
All right. Oh, cool. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
So that brings me to an interesting, you talked about your schedule a little bit, and I want to talk about your channel and kind of how long you've been doing it, what your game plan has been, whether that's changed. There's a lot to your channel that I think people would love to see, like kind of behind the scenes, understand how you do it, why you do it, all that kind of stuff. So can we kind of start with like when you started and why you started your channel? I think that would be a good jumping off point.
That's a fun, I love answering this question. I've talked about it a little bit on my channel, but I was buying and selling and trading knives for probably 7 or so years before I started the channel. And I was working at a dealership. I was selling cars, which I love.
The same.
Yeah. Oh, were you? Oh, okay. Wait, I feel like, have we talked about this before? The selling cars thing?
It's possible. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, so I was selling cars, but those are long hours because you're working Saturdays and you're working 50 to 60 hours a week. And, it was a good job and it paid well, but I was constantly, every day I was carrying something different. And the guys at the dealership who I'm, a lot of them still work there and I'm still really good friends with them, but they got to know me as like that weird new guy who's always carrying a knife.
It's like way too into knives. Yeah.
Yeah. And slowly they, I think figured out that I was normal enough to where it wasn't like a scary kind of, knife person.
Sure.
And then I started convincing them to like, carry different things or to try different things or to buy. A lot of them were, like I've never spent more than $10 on a knife. And then, I was saying, well, some of these knives have attributes or qualities that you might find beneficial, and those can cost more money,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was convinced. So anyways, somebody at some point, I think it was actually my buddy Ricky, who I've done videos with. I used to do a lot in the beginning. He's like, you really should upload something to YouTube and just see what kind of response you get. And so I remember exactly where I was sitting, and it was 3 years ago. So what would that have been? 2018?
Sounds right. Yep.
It was in February of 2018. If I remember correctly, I think the exact day that I started was February 14th, 2018. And it was a
Valentine's
hinder.
Day.
Was it?
February
Oh,
14th. That's Valentine's. I don't know.
what? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was somewhere around there. But my first video that I uploaded is still up. It's a picture of just like a generic SAK and a Hinder XM18, and it was me like why I feel like I can justify this type of purchase, despite this knife being, for the most part, all that anybody could ever need day to day,
Adequate.
right?
Yeah.
And yes, as you would guess, it didn't hardly get any views because it was just some random. I just threw it up there, but I noticed that it like after a day it had like 4 views, and I was like, cool. I kind of like that someone engaged with it. It was, it gave me that little feeling of elation, and it made me want to do it again. And I thought, well, if I make more videos, maybe more people will watch. And so it just snowballed, and I got kind of addicted to just talking, and because that's all I wanted to do anyway. But people, my coworkers they had limited
Sick
attention.
of listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I'll just talk, and then the people who want to come in and listen will do that. So I started doing that, and it was helping me kind of relieve that built up, like, I really want to talk with this stuff about this stuff with people. And I was putting it up on YouTube, and it just slowly started to kind of grow. So it's a fond memory. I still feel that same way now that I did over 3 years ago. So
That's awesome, dude. So you said you'd been collecting for 7 years before you started. How
yeah,
did collecting start for you? If we were to turn back the clock even further, what was the catalyst for that? Was it a family member? Was it a friend?
I
Something you
mean,
always had?
I still have my first pocket knife. I'll show it. I showed this before. My sometimes my brother and I would go and we'd stay at my grandma's house, which was the original house my dad grew up in. So all of his stuff was there, my grandpa's stuff, and there were no rules at grandma's house. It was whatever you wanted to do. Here's a bunch of candy bars, and there's probably a bunch of dangerous stuff in the garage, and your dad's old stuff. Whatever, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
So I remember digging up this guy exactly, this old, and I think it's a Camillus. Yeah, there's no way to see it properly, but it's a Camillus.
sure.
This was
I'll believe you.
apparently my grandpa's knife, then my dad's knife, and I remember begging. I said, "Can I have this?" My grandma was like, "Yeah, no, whatever." And my dad was like, "No." This was like I was like 7, and he was like, "No, maybe not yet. Maybe a little bit later, right?" But I figured out there was a ton of my dad had a ton of old pocket knives. My grandpa did too, and I just loved that. The idea, the concept of a blade, you could use it to cut. We were out cutting tree branches or whatever in the backyard,
Yeah,
and just spending time outside and doing fun stuff. We had, toy firearms and stuff like that. We would just play adventure in the backyard. And my brother and I the only time we could ever play with pocket knives was kind of in secret at my grandma's
gotcha.
house. And so eventually my dad finally, there's more a story to that. He actually took it away and then gave it back because I was throwing it. But
As any
that,
kid would logically do. I mean, come
yeah.
on.
And so that time spent not being allowed to have them made me fascinated. That grew
Mm,
into the, kind of the junk, like the fascination with the junker stuff and some of the fantasy stuff as I transitioned from, a 9 or a 10-year-old to a younger teenager, at
yeah,
swords and, junky rainbow coated stuff, right? Gas station knives. My first good knife, it was a complete accident. It was the Kershaw Blur, a Tanto serrated black coated Kershaw Blur from Walmart. It was at
perfect.
the time $57. And I thought, $57. Boy, that's an expensive pocket knife. I have no idea what the black coating is on there, but it looks pretty serious.
Yeah.
So I picked that up, and it turns out the Kershaw Blur is a great knife.
Hmm.
I just had no idea about steel, and I remember watching some video or maybe reading an article or something about it. And I remember first learning that not all steel is created equal. And the 12C27 or 12C27N that was on the blur at the time was considered a very good steel for the money. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? So that's kind of where it took off. And then that's when I learned that when you pay more money for something, there's a lot of different elements that you may or may not be paying for. And
Right.
there are different levels of quality. There are different applications for different steel and different types of folding knives. And it opened the door to this expansive world, eventually led to blade forms, right? And I
Mhm.
was just like overload, but I wanted to consume as much as I could. It was so, you know, when you get into a new hobby, it just gets so intense. You get so excited. You want to learn everything that you can. So that's kind of what happened there.
I feel that. Yeah, I think it was when I discovered like the Instagram side of the hobby, that's when it got crazy for me because I'd always had knives in my pocket. I had some decent knives growing up because luckily my dad would eventually, when he'd get a new knife, sometimes I'd get his old Benchmade or something, right?
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, no, I was fortunate. The things I would buy were horrendous. I would go to the Ventura County Gun Show here in Southern California, and
Okay.
I would buy like the worst like Pakistani made swords and like fixed blades that were like half brass knuckles, half fixed blade, and they like
Heck
would
yeah.
fall apart, like just bad stuff.
Yeah.
But luckily I had older brothers and a dad, and so like we'd also go to like the Cold Steel parking lot sale, and I'd get like factory seconds Cold Steel stuff as a
Oh,
kid.
cool.
That was
Okay.
like, oh great, like now this is cheap enough for me to afford it, but it's actually quality stuff. So like the knives I was throwing at stuff were like the Cold Steel SRK, which like, yeah, you could throw that knife at stuff. It'll take
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I discovered the Instagram side of like the community, it was game over for me. It went from having like 4 or 5 decent pocket knives to like all of a sudden there were 1,000 knives on my radar that I wanted that I hadn't known existed, and then it was deep after that. But
Uh, I love hearing that. I think in a way, it might have been more beneficial to the channel had I discovered it sooner. I did not discover or even, well, I knew what Instagram was.
yeah.
I wasn't even on the Instagram scene up until just 2 years ago.
So
And I
you'd already
looked and
had
I
the
was like,
channel for a year before you got on.
yeah, yeah. And that was the only platform that I was on. And then I looked at Instagram because people were like, you should get an Instagram because you're looking at all this stuff. And I looked and I was like, yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea. And then I got into Instagram, and this was at year 8 or 9.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh. So then it took everything that I had at that point and just sent it through the roof. And I realized, some of the bigger reviewers that I was watching at the time, Jim Skelton, Nick Shabazz, Birdshot, I'll name drop all day, but that was like, oh, like this is where maybe a lot of them discover some of this stuff. This is where they
Hmm.
interact with a lot of these makers and designers. I was always amazed by how some of these YouTube reviewers were able to gather so much information and have these personal connections with people. And I was like, do they just all go like have coffee every morning? Like, what's the
It's
deal?
all in the DMs, bro.
Yeah, it's in the DMs. Yeah. uh, but yeah, so Instagram, oh, well, that's an addiction in and of itself for sure.
It is. Yeah, for me, the hobby was on Instagram for a couple years before it hit YouTube. And so I was kind of the opposite, where it was like, I think on Instagram, I probably had, I don't know, a couple thousand followers by the time I started my YouTube channel, which helped when I started the YouTube channel because
Sure.
I didn't like push that I started my YouTube channel that hard, but I'd put in my stories or whatever, like, hey, I'm giving this a shot. Um, I've never been, I have a real hard time, like, please follow me. I can't even bring myself to say, please like and subscribe. That's just, to me, it's not me. Um,
Sure.
but like by just sharing, hey, I have a channel now, if you want to check it out, here it is, that like immediately my first few videos I was getting, I don't know, 40, 50 views or something in the first day, which was like, hey, maybe I can do this,
Yeah.
which really helped. But yeah, now I take both pretty seriously, although the last couple weeks I've been really really slacking on uploads on both. I've been in vacation mode and I'm trying to work myself out of it, but um
Man, I get that. Like my pace is crazy, but whatever your pace, like everybody's different. Everybody has their comfort zone. It's kind of like what you said with the asking to like and subscribe. everybody's different about that. And
Hmm.
since YouTube and all of these, different social media platforms essentially allow you to bring what should be your true personality to the table and then attract like-minded individuals, which is
Yep.
great. So my audience likes it when I literally throw my Instagram card and almost demands but I make a joke out of it because
Right.
otherwise it's like, whoa, dude, like we get it. You want us to follow you on it. But
Yep.
comfort zone for your pace and the information that you want to bring to the table, you know, it's good that you do, take breaks and go at your own pace and do your own thing and be you because that's who you want. You want other people who enjoy your content and think like you, or
Yep.
will eventually through viewing your content to come and interact with you and share in the hobby the same way that you enjoy it. Right? I mean,
Right.
I guess I don't want to speak for you, but that's kind of how I see it. You
No, I
know?
totally agree because I think the flip side of that is like conversely, if you lock yourself into a box of doing a type of content or a pace of content, whatever it may be, that doesn't feel natural or like it's yours, then you're going to resent feeling like you have to keep up with that because you will, or otherwise your followers are going to wane and you're going to have to rediscover new ones. And it's like people don't want to deal with that. They just want the success. So I've seen it plenty of times, not just YouTube, but content creation in general. It's what my wife has done full time for a long time. And now I do all
Oh,
our
really?
photography. And yeah, so
Oh, okay.
content creation is how our house exists. Well, it's an apartment, but it's like it's what pays the bills here. And
Yeah,
so I've seen a lot of people burn out, whether it's Instagram or YouTube or a blog or whatever it is, because they find this thing that works, but it's not actually what they want to do. They're just doing it because it works. And then as
right,
soon as I don't know, as soon as it stops rewarding them, like even just a little bit, then it's like, oh, I don't want to do this at all. It just gets
right.
old quick. But
Yep, yep. You're
yeah, so
exactly right. I've got a great example of it actually. A lot of people don't know this. There is another channel. I can't remember if it's still up or not. It actually started as a joke because in like around the 1 to 2,000 sub mark, I had people coming in, and it's just part of it. They were like, "Dude, I love the knives you're showing, but your voice drives me crazy, and I wish you'd just shut up and show the knives." Because I talk for like 20 minutes at a time. And
yeah,
so I was like, all right. So I started this second channel kind of as a joke called Silent Complex, where it was literally the same knives that I was showing, but it was a totally silent overview, basically just a showcasing, right?
yeah,
And I was like, this should be easy because it's like 2 to 4 minute uploads, and the two channels can sort of share. Well, then I realized that the excess work that I was doing, I loved what I was doing on Metal Complex, but this excess obligatory work that I was doing, even on a 2 to 4 minute upload, you have the titling and the thumbnail and the description and the tags and all that other crap that
takes
you have
time to
to do.
download it, takes time to upload it. Yeah, all of it is a tax.
Yeah, and it wasn't fun. And the pace, the 2 upload a day pace that I have on Metal Complex is crazy, but I love doing that. And I did not like doing Silent Complex, so I just stopped because I was like, this is for nothing. Like it's not. I mean, I'm not. What I'm getting out of it is not translating to happiness. So I was
Yeah.
just like, nah, I don't want to do that. So yeah, I get it, man.
Totally. So another thing that I think is interesting, having you on as a guest in particular. So we haven't actually talked all that much over time, but I've had a lot of people mention you to me. It seems like see people all the time will message me, "Hey, you came up in Metal Complex's comment section or whatever." I feel like we've run somewhat parallel. I
Yeah,
think a reason for that is because you and I both have a really consistent upload schedule up until beginning of this month. I had uploaded at least one video every single day since I started the channel. In the
nice.
beginning, it was sometimes three or four, and then a lot of times it was two. Like I had, I think in my first year, it was over 600 uploads, which is
Wow.
kind of like your pace. You go
Yeah.
ham, and so a lot of people have like, I don't know. I feel like we get talked about in similar conversations a lot of the time. So for you, I'm curious, what was your philosophy when you decided I'm going to do this many videos? Because a lot of channels, their pace is one a week. Some of them it's twice a month. Some of them it's a couple times a week, but it's rare to find one that does literally daily and sometimes more. So what was your like thought process in that?
So it has a lot to do with my rate of acquisition at the time because I was so like I was on the uphill of like, oh my gosh, this world is so much bigger and it's growing so fast, and I just want to touch everything. And I at the time um I was definitely spending way too much money on knives. And
Sure.
I was thinking like, as much as I love to talk about this stuff and I'm acquiring it, and I was a car salesman and eventually transitioned into a digital media salesman.
Mm.
And so we were constantly looking at numbers and ways to kind of balance things out, the amount of work that you put in and the payoff for it. They were always, both groups are always saying, don't, I mean, like if you're going to do something, be honest and do it because you care about it, but don't do it to a point where you run yourself into the ground and you're not getting anything back. You should make something for the time you're putting in.
There should be
Because
juice for the squeeze. Yeah.
right. So my idea was volume and how much volume can I put out before I'm not enjoying it. There were a few days where I tried doing 3 uploads a day and I realized that's not going to work. There were other times where I did 4 videos a week or 3 videos a week, and I thought this is great, but I'm not seeing the same type of engagement. And something that I found that I really loved, something that Ricky and I would do together is we would oftentimes, because he got into knives at the dealership kind of as through conversation with me, but he really locked in on it. We were both ordering knives so often that we would both have new knives on the same day, and we would wait and bring the boxes together. And instead of on slower days when there's nobody driving the lot, like on a Tuesday afternoon, we would go find a vehicle to sit in,
Yeah.
bring our boxes, and just unbox them together, and just talk and kind of pass them back and forth, which is what knife people who other people who are fortunate enough to have other knife people in their lives will find that they do that a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bringing knives and kind of swapping them and saying, hey, check this out. I loved that, and it created so much conversation. And I was like, this was during the time that we were recording for the channel, and I was like, this could be an upload in and of itself. People love to watch the whole organic first experience, because sometimes you open it up and you're like, yeah. And other times you just lose it. And I would get so excited for certain things. And so I thought, with the channel, because there's actually a pattern to it. Monday through Friday in the mornings, it's a review. And then in the afternoons, Monday through Friday, it's an unboxing. And so this sort of keeps everything moving. And, eventually I was able to, with the help of a few friends that kind of helped get the credibility thing out there. Jeff Goodnow, I don't know if he's watching, but he was a huge part of that. People started sending me things for review, which helped with the unboxing and also helped with the review content, kind of the mix of the two. And that was attracting different types of people. So there were different levels of engagement. And then I love to ramble and talk about all these different weird elements. So the weekends are always discussion topics surrounding what my favorites are in certain categories at any given time. And I've been doing that exact thing for, I think it's been 1.5 years of the pace of 2 a day. And I just enjoy that, because it's like with new things comes new thoughts and new, like, I didn't know that I would like this. I didn't know that this would be so interesting. So it all kind of, it helps me continue that same cycle of content. So
I dig it. Yeah, I think especially if you can get yourself into a groove. Like my problem right now is I'm getting back in that groove, and I've got some content recorded now where it's going to be daily again. But when you're in that groove, it's so much easier to stay in it. A lot of the content creators I've talked about, friends who have channels and stuff, when I've talked with them, it tends to be the norm that if you have an irregular upload schedule, then it becomes easy to like miss a whole month because you're not locked into that.
Yeah.
And my whole philosophy when I started was, when I started the channel, I wanted there to be content when people clicked on my channel. So day one, I uploaded 4 videos, because otherwise, when someone finds my channel, there's just the one video there. They're not going to subscribe to that. There's They have one video to go off of whether they like you or not. But if I had a list of them, then there's stuff for people to find. And YouTube is unique in the sense that old content isn't bad. Like on Instagram, stuff I posted 2 months ago, only weirdos who dig back in my feed are going to find that. No offense to you weirdos who do that, but like it's rare for people to go back that far on Instagram. On
Yeah.
YouTube, that stuff is still searchable. It still comes up.
Oh
You
yeah.
put in like, and all that exists. So yeah, I was just like, I need to have a library. And then once I had, I think like 50 videos up, probably in my first month or maybe even less, it was like, all right, now I have a library. Now I need to just make sure I'm consistent. I need to do 1 to 2 a day so that the people who subscribe to me expect an upload. And then I become a channel that they just watch regularly. And that's going to drive all of my time and all that kind of stuff. And oh, Kyle, look at that. Appreciate it, dude. Super chatted us up. Love you, Kyle. But yeah, so I think it's cool. Like you talked about how you were familiar with like looking at analytics to see what actually drives success on the platform. Yeah. And so many content creators seem to be afraid of talking about wanting to get success out of it. And I think part of that is like the knife and gun community, like this whole kind of niche, there tends to be this weird like stigma against influencers or people trying to make money in it, not against the makers, but the content creators. There's like this weird thing. And so I like that you can be open about like, I wanted to be successful at it. I looked at what would drive my growth and drive my traffic, and then monetization makes more, like all that runs together.
100%. And like, you know, that's the thing. It's like we were talking about earlier. You don't do it strictly because you're generating something from, you know, I didn't make anything from YouTube for the first year. You know, it was just, but I found what made me happy as far as content generation. And then my hope was that at some point I could continue doing what I was passionate about and get something for the time that I was putting in. But, you know, watching some of these other channels that the basis of everything is pure honesty, like that really set, I was like, I really respected that about a lot of these other channels. I was like, they're so hardcore into saying what they think, even if it's not shared by the, you know, the mass majority of the vast majority of it, right? It was about honesty, and I was like, well, that's why I'm watching, because I'm automatically assuming that I'm getting pure and maybe not information I always agree with, but I'm really getting what they think. So I really dedicated myself to that, and I thought I'm not, even if I think other people might like this, Benchmade bug out. Sorry, that was a weird cough. Even if I think other people might like it, I'm not going to say that I like it just because it's cool. I want to talk about why I do or don't like stuff without pulverizing it, because that's no fun to just grind something into powder, you know.
Totally.
If I don't like it, then I'm just not going to show it. But I want to show stuff that's interesting, you know, that you get that emotional, like positive or negative kind of, this is what I think is good or bad. And so I just kept doing that. And but I made it a point to be very honest and open about, this is how the channel operates. This is how the content is able to continue to flow, right? It's expensive to create 2 videos a day or 1 video a day. It's expensive to create 3 videos a week. It costs money, you know, so you have to find a way. If you're going to bring that type of content to people, you have to find a good balance between, you know, passion and able to generate the funds required to put the content out there, and then enjoying what you're doing. And it is good to get juice from the oranges. Is that how you put it?
Juice from the squeeze. Yeah. If you're squeezing and no juice is coming out, stop squeezing. Yeah. So there's a few things that I'd like to touch on there. I'll probably forget some of them, but firstly, you mentioned that it's possible to be nice about something while being negative about it. And I think that's totally true. I've always had like this personal philosophy when there's something that I really don't like, and there's been a number of popular knives that I've ended up not liking, and those comment sections are always hilarious. That's another rabbit hole we can go down. But like I did early on in my channel, I did a carry challenge with a Sebenza 21. I didn't like it. I don't like the Sebenza 21. There's a number of gripes I have with the way that they market their knives compared to what they actually are. And that's like a thing for me. But even in the midst of saying all that, and I've done that subject a lot. I have like a 3-hour podcast with a buddy about Chris Reeve knives. That's just all about that. But to me, it's like, just because I don't like this for these reasons that I outline as I talk about it, doesn't mean that I even necessarily disagree on like a fundamental level with the people who love it. And that's
Right.
totally, it's a fine conclusion to come to. Like every Medford I've reviewed, I didn't like, but I've got nothing against Medford fans other than the ones who are a-holes in the comments and take it personally. Like you're allowed to like that. And I don't think
Sure.
less of you for it. That can be your preference. And I think like having that type of mentality where you can talk about something negatively, but then say, in fairness, that doesn't mean everyone has to agree with me, because knife reviewing is opinion, like so much
Oh,
of the time.
you're so, man, that's so true. I love the way that you are approaching this because there are always, I mean, unless you're looking at, the rainbow coated batarang that I've got over here somewhere. With a lot of modern, straightforward knife designs, where there is like that general sense of, okay, this is obviously the person who designed this cared about it. They're using an OEM, or they are an OEM who is able to create it in a way that, the final form is quality.
Hmm.
There are certain aesthetic things that are going to appeal or not appeal to certain people. There are certain functional aspects that will appeal or not appeal to certain people. And some people, whether they are enthusiast, collector, user, or some hybridization of any of those, will have a different reason for enjoying the item in the first place.
Yep.
So all you can do as a reviewer, right? It's funny how people expect you to be perfectly robotic.
Right.
All you can do is you start with your own bias and you give your opinion, and then say, here's who I think might enjoy this a little more than me, or this is why I enjoy it, but here's why I think a lot of people might not enjoy it, right?
Hmm.
Based on, as you continue to make content, you can continue to interact with people in the community, especially if you're making lots of content. You get lots of feedback, and people will tell you, did you consider this? What about this? And so,
Hmm.
many times I've gone, hey, no, I didn't even think about that. So then you apply it to it, but that's all you can do. And just say, like, here's what I think. You got to make the choice for yourself, but this is what I think.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
So another thing that I think is interesting is you talked about how you can try to be unbiased, like regardless of how you got an item. I feel like I got that out of one of the things
yeah,
you're saying. So like I don't know about you, but I have taken a number of knives from manufacturers. I've taken a lot of loaners, even more than that. Um, I've never been paid to do a review in terms of like them sending me an item and sending me money. But one day, if that happens, if I get big enough for that to happen, I have no problem. Like that's the way that my wife works in content
sure,
creation. She is an Instagram influencer, whatever you want to call it, and companies will send her product and send her money to post
sure.
about it. Now, the
Right.
difference is we're reviewers, right? So if somebody sends me a product, the way I see it, they're sending it to a reviewer, not a hype guy, not an influencer, not like the deliverables from me are that I'm going to review it. And so if the person understands that, then I can still take the item and take money to feature it on my channel, as long as they understand it's going to a reviewer who there's a good chance that if I don't like it, I'm going to say negative things. Like,
Yeah.
and I think if you build up your channel in a sense that people see you do negative reviews as well, then that absolutely is fair game, that it could happen again. So do you feel like, I don't know, have you seen any like struggle with that where people, because you got something for free, they don't believe you, or like,
I have a perfect answer for that. It's actually part of the reason that I structured my channel. So, as you know, ad revenue on YouTube is garbage. It doesn't hardly pay for anything, but there are multiple ways that you can, monetize things and help
yeah,
keep everything going. I intentionally set up those affiliate programs because I didn't want to, and I've definitely had I'm not going to name names, but I've had companies say, hey, we'll pay you to do a review of this, but they wanted partial control over the review. So
mm,
never once have I actually accepted money for review. I say, you can send me the knife, but you're not going to tell me what to say. You can
right.
send me the knife. If you want it back, that's fine. You want me to keep it? Great. I love free stuff.
Yeah. You can
The
send me
affiliate,
even like things that, like facts about the knife. Send me a write up of things
you're
that I
right.
could include like details about it. but
I
don't tell
love
me
stuff like
what spin to take. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that it helps create a foundation. But I want to put me into this review because people watching your content, if you're being fake, they'll notice at the moment that if you're full of crap, they will notice at the moment that you start the video,
Like the
So you
Dwight Schrute
can't
quote when he's teaching Ryan how to be a salesman. And he's like, "You smell that, temp?" And he's like, "You know what that is? It's bull crap. And people can smell it from a mile away." That's I think of that every time. Yeah.
that's the episode I gotta stop for a second. The funniest line in that whole show, I think it's the same episode when Ryan's bent over in the middle of a field planting a seed, and he said, and Dwight's teaching a lesson. He says, "Just as you have planted your seed in the ground, I have planted my seed in you." And Ryan goes, "I don't think you know what you're saying."
That's right before Dwight goes and gets in his car. He's like, "Oh, I forgot something," and then drives away too, leaves him in the field. I
That is
love that
one of the
episode.
funniest episodes. That's probably my favorite all-around episode and the single funniest quote of the whole show. We have the Office on repeats just all the
Same.
time.
And now that it's on Peacock, there's Superfan episodes with the deleted scenes in them. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
that's
seen that yet.
wonderful. We
They're
will
like
no, we'll have to
45-minute
download that.
episodes because they put all the deleted stuff in. So good.
That's cool, man. I love that. Well, anyway, so I thought, with these affiliate programs, which I found out a lot of retailers have, what it allows me to do is put a link in the description, which people constantly ask for anyway. In my old content, people were like, "You're reviewing this knife, but there's no link. Like, what if we want to go get it?"
Yeah.
What I realized is that a lot of people watch my content, and knife content in general for entertainment, partially because they want to hear an opinion, whether it is equal or opposition. But also, a lot of people who are watching have already made up their mind or have even already
Bought it.
purchased.
It's
Right.
in the mail on the way, and they want
Yeah.
confirmation. Yeah.
But they're considering buying it and they're seeking reaffirmation. So my thought process was, I can provide a link, a commissionable link, where I'm not being paid up front to review the knife. But what it does is it allows, the business or the entity to gain traffic. If someone decides to purchase it, you get a small kickback. But I get to keep talking about the thing and say whatever I want. What I found is that whether I'm positive or negative about something, the people who have already decided to buy it will go down and use that link and buy it anyway. And that revenue is then generated and able to be used for future content on the channel, and I get to stay honest, which is the biggest. That's because if I feel like I'm being controlled, I hate it.
Yep.
If I feel like somebody else has control over my content and my thoughts with any element, that is the one thing that just makes me like, no, you don't get to control this. I built this, and I want to be audience that are honest. That's why people are coming here to hear honest thing, So I immediately turned down offers, and I'm not saying I would judge anybody who operates differently than me, but I turned down offers for payment up front because it's like, would this allow us to have a little bit of input over the positivity of this video? I don't like that. Let me tell people what I think. That's me though, because I feel like if I'm paid, then would I feel obligated? I don't want to find out,
I dig that answer. I think, one of the things my friends often say about me, the people I talk to the most, is like Lefty EDC is constantly, he gets frustrated with me because if I start to sense that somebody wants me to do something, I immediately become resistant to doing that thing. Because I don't want other people's motivations dictating my actions. I want to do what I feel in the moment is best for me. So like, it's the same type of thinking with like why I can't bring myself to say, please like and subscribe, is because to me, on average, most of the people who say it, some like you, to be totally fair, are very good at saying it in a way that feels like you. But so many people seem to say it because it's what other people say. It's not because they've actually thought about what they're saying. And for me, I try to be deliberate. And so like, I will not say it now out of principle, where it's like, it's not me. It's not my thing. Sure. And whenever somebody wants me to do something like that, I want to go the other direction. So I have to watch myself on it, because sometimes like when I reviewed a second Medford and the first one had not gone well, I knew I kind of wanted to not like it, but I fought that because the reason why I didn't want to like it is because all the stupid people in the comments who made it personal that I didn't like the first one. It was like, well, now I'm just going to dump on every Medford because you guys are the worst, you know. But
Yeah.
I tried to look at it objectively, and you can fight through that. But yeah, I have this inner, I don't know, there's this bone in my body that can't deal with, as soon as I notice it's like, we want Bearded Gear to do it this way, I'm like, not doing it.
Man, you know where it stems from, I think, is growing up and you are constantly like being, there's peer pressure, and then there are, your parents, and then there are teachers and coaches and eventually bosses, and some of those people are they're attempting to mold you and guide you for non selfish reasons. They're legitimately trying to help, and you find out later, a lot of times it's with bosses pushing a quota. They're not trying to mold you because they're trying to make you a better person.
Right.
They're concerned with their paycheck. They're concerned with there's some other motive, and you realize, and a lot of times it's their own ego, and then you realize that so I'm doing this not for me, I'm doing this for you, but you're painting a picture that says it's for the good of your character, or no, and that's.
I've been burned by that real particularly. Yeah. Especially in the workplace. Like,
and you start to pick up on that as you get older, and appreciate the people who really care about, you developing and turning into a genuine person, and other people who are like, I don't really care, but because of my position, I'm going to use this position or this element as leverage to get you to do what I want you to do. And you pick up on that, and then it starts to sting, and you start to get more and more offended, to the point where it's just like, no, I will not be doing that. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Right. Yeah. You build up a tolerance to it where you're just like, you either tune it out or you shut it down.
Yeah.
That's an interesting segue, I think. So the way I look at my comment section, let me say this, especially at the beginning. Now I feel like, I don't know, I've developed my own style with it. But when I started my channel, I was cognizant of how YouTube comment sections could look. I'd been watching YouTube for a long time, and I had this kind of philosophy in mind where it was like, if there's anybody giving me feedback, not even just criticism, but feedback in general, and I've never met them, never talked to them before, it's probably worth listening to with like 10% of my focus. If it's somebody who I know and who I trust and who I know understands who I am, then I'll absolutely listen to it and I'll value it. Or if they have credibility in my eyes for some reason, if I don't know them personally, but I've liked their channel for a long time and they give me feedback, valuable. But they're like, I had to build into my mind before I even started, there's going to be feedback that is worthless to me. Yeah. And over time, that's become, now I look for basically no feedback, even if it's people that I know, unless it's like a very little thing. It's like, I'm just going to do my channel the way I want to do my channel. But the comment section is an intense place. And I've had to become like, I've had to just see it as the hilarity that it is and take none of it personally. But I see a lot of channels struggle with that, where I'll get another channel owner will send me a screenshot of a comment they got. They're like, can you believe this guy said this? And I'll be like, that's hilarious. That's hilarious that the guy would say that. Like, it's so mean, and he doesn't know you, like, why would that guy even, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So for you, how have you kind of dealt with your comment section, and has that like evolved over time? Was it always the same philosophy, or how is that balanced out?
In the beginning, and I've said this before, like, if you go back and watch my old content, here's how like, right now you're getting me plus caffeine, but you're always getting exactly how I interact with people in real life. And in the beginning I was like, hello, this is Metal Complex, and today, and some people, that is their personality. So I'm not coming down on people who do, but that's not me. That was how I assumed YouTube knife viewers wanted to watch knife content, right? And so I was like, The overall length is exactly 8.75 inches, and you can see we have a 3.75-inch cutting edge, so decent ratios and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, I hate this, because that's not how my voice sounds. But
Yeah.
I'm tiptoeing into a community that I don't know anything about. I started coming out a little bit, sidetracking and rambling on little things that bothered me. People, where I was like, oh, like I always joke about the cold steel triad lock. There's always a guy, no matter what you're talking about. If you
You could be
say
talking
something
about a
like,
fixed blade and he'll say you should have a triad lock.
yeah, I'll be like, it's a frame lock. It looks like the geometry's good. So you can depend, you can expect that to be a fairly strong lock. And there's like always a guy that's like, not as strong as the cold steel triad lock. Like he has to, he can't not do it. So
It's just Lynn
imitated
Thompson
him.
with a bunch of fake screen names, by the way.
Yeah. And they have to. So I started mocking or predicting what people would say. And it was more my personality. And I realized I was getting kind of a laugh and more positive feedback. I'd make somebody mad every now and then, but that's just what you're going to get. And it was like if they after, in the beginning, I was looking for any type of feedback, but then I realized I'd rather just do things my own way. And some people are going to get mad or feel offended even.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are going to, connect and go, yeah, that is funny. You know what? I have seen that before, and it's kind of humorous. And so I turned some things into a joke and took other things seriously. But I pushed this whole, none of this is that serious. We all like this stuff for essentially the same base reason, because it's a knife. It's
Mm-hmm.
fun, right? We're going to disagree with each other. And so moving forward, I would see certain people that were always there, always talking, and generally saying, being positive. And if there was some minor thing like, hey, I've been watching for a while, I comment periodically, and I've noticed that you do this type of thing in this order, it might save you some time. And that was helpful, with
Sure.
the structure of things. And it kind of helped me figure out this is how people like to receive this information. But it's like, I listen to I listen to a lot of heavy metal, but I do like rap. And he had a line in one of his, he said, I'll accept advice if it's not presented ignorantly. And that's kind of how I've gone about this. It's like, if you're going to give me advice, right, you're going to come, it depends on how you come at it. If you come at it as I'm entitled to you responding to me just because I left the comment, you don't
Right.
know who I am or where I came from, but I have graced your comment section with my presence.
With an
I
insult.
demand, yeah, and they demand, or it's like they don't care about how it's being presented. Even if it's a good idea, I'm like, now kick rocks, man. Like if you want to come in here, like this content is free.
Yep.
You're not owed anything. Like you can leave a comment, but if you're gonna come at it like somebody owes you something just because you left it, no, that's not how that works. And so sometimes I'll pick and choose, how I respond to stuff like that. But most of the time, yeah, the comment section is an absolute dumpster fire. And I try to mitigate that dumpster fire by, in the middle of reviews, predicting with different voices. People who watch my channel know that I have Caveman and Mickey Mouse and Hank Hill, predicting how different types of people will react to different types of information based on stereotypes surrounding said item.
Sure.
And most of the time, people get a kick out of it, and it also it stops a lot of people from leaving the comment in the first place. So I try to have fun with it and make it a joke, make it, I'm trying to present it like this is all just fun. If you're about to type me up a book, don't take it so seriously. It's more fun than anything else.
Right.
Sorry, you got me off on it. That was a really good question, and I had very strong feelings about it. So
that's a good thing. Yeah, one of the things that always, especially when I started my channel, the most consistent feedback I would get was show more of the knife and less of your face. And I made a decision when I started my channel that I was going to do everything vlog style. The only tabletop stuff I ever do is because I'm disassembling or modding a knife or something, and then it wouldn't make sense for me to be working on it like this, right? But I have this philosophy personally that works for me, where like the reviews that I tend to trust the most easily or get to know the person the easiest are when I can see their facial expressions and their mannerisms. And for me, it's easier to read people's faces than it is their hands. And so that's just what I prefer to watch. And therefore, it's what I wanted to make. And so the number of people who would just comment like, stop showing your face, show the knife. It made me like deliberately in the next video show the knife less, because it's like,
And your
watch.
face is closer.
Yeah, it's literally, it's like there is a sea of YouTube content creators. And even within the niche of knives, there are a lot of options. And
Right.
90% of them are primarily tabletop. So it's like, don't watch my channel. Like, it's no skin off my back if you don't like it.
Man.
And so, yeah, I would combat people sometimes in the comments, and still do. My rule is if someone comes at me like a dick, I can respond like a dick. I
Yeah.
choose to be kind to everybody generally. I don't start as the dick, but if you start it, then
Right.
there it goes. I'm going to respond, and it's going in my stories because people find it hilarious.
And they get so offended when you fire back. They're like, how dare you? How dare you come at me, good sir? Right?
Yeah.
Like they come. It makes me think of like a little dog. They get, like it got out of the gate and you're walking by its house and it runs up and nips you in the heel. And you turn around like, man, I will flatten you, little dog. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize you were gonna fight back. I'm offended. It's funny that people do that, but people don't realize that your goal is, as a creator, is not to cater to everybody. Your goal is to be you and to attract people who enjoy. And especially if you build a fan, because you're close to 10. Are you over 10,000 subscribers?
No, I'm about to hit 8.
Okay, so you have a huge base of people who are like, yeah, I like this, I want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already established that what you're doing is right for your audience and for what you enjoy. So some guy who comes up, right, he just finished a Logan Paul video and he kind of stumbles into your channel somehow, and he's like,
he's doing it wrong.
Right, he's doing it wrong. So he types up that you're doing it wrong. It's like people don't realize that is a complete waste of time. They make no effort to check, has this person been creating content in this fashion for a while? Do people seem to be responding positively to this type of content, right? If every video you upload is getting 200 dislikes and 2 likes, that'd be, maybe it's not working out, right?
Unless you love getting dislikes. If that's your thing too, then
yeah. That's what I tell people. It's like, dude, instead of typing me up 4 paragraphs that I'm going to read basically none of, just leave a dislike and get off my channel. Like there's no reason. And it's not, man, this is funny. All this people are probably like, wow, Complex is way more negative than he puts on. But you struck an interesting chord here because, we deal with this every day. And it's funny that, ultimately to wrap this up, it's funny that people who come out of nowhere and obviously have no experience with your channel whatsoever feel like, number one, it's a good idea to leave random feedback. And number two, that they're entitled to a positive response from you.
Yeah.
No, you are not. It's like, you're not. This is how I do things here. And you have, like you put it, you have a sea of infinite choices, right?
Yeah. So that's part of why I engage back, is like, my philosophy behind that is I don't think I'm going to change the world. It's not this grand illusion, but I think a lot of people who leave idiotic comments never get a response. And so there's no negative response to tell them that they're even being an idiot. They just think that that's an okay way to live. And so I like to respond in a way that highlights how much of an idiot they are. And then I like to post it publicly. A lot of the time I block out their name. I've stopped even doing that because you posted that with your name on it to begin with. I can share that on my Instagram stories. YouTube is public. So I will respond back in a way that I find funny and I think illustrates to the person, hey, you're being a dick. And then if they realize that in that moment, it could be instructive for them. And I've had not very many, but a couple of people over time end up messaging me later on Instagram. Hey, I've commented some mean things on your videos before. Like, that was out of line. Like, you do you,
Or they're having a bad day. That's what they're having a bad day. Yeah.
And sure, you can have a bad day, but if you make your bad day my bad day, I'm going to make your bad day worse. And that's fair. Like, I don't try to be an aggressive person, but when I'm met with aggression for no reason, I'll respond with aggression to a
100%.
degree.
And you should, because otherwise they just continue on with like, this is how I can do it. My go-to is, especially if it's a long one, it's you should do this, or I'd like it if you did that, or this, a combination. It's this big long book. It's simple but effective, lowercase, no, period. That is my favorite way to handle that. Or just not. I'll get wrapped up and back and forth with people sometimes, and it's always funny when people backpedal and they're like, "Oh, I'm just trolling." No, you weren't.
I'm just trolling, bro.
Like, yeah, I'm just trolling, bro. No, you weren't. Don't give me that, man.
Not here.
You you climb this mountain with me. We're at the peak now, But it's and YouTube allows you to make people invisible, which is funny to us. I'm sure that there are people on both of our channels who leave daily negative comments and have no idea that no one can see them.
I rarely use that feature, but it's been used a handful of times because sometimes people just won't stop, and then it's like you've lost your privileges, bro.
They're dedicated, and you see the same people, like, because we all watch a lot of channels, and a lot of us watch each other.
Mm-hmm.
You see the same people saying the same things under the same types of videos under there, and it's like, how much of your life are you dedicating to doing this? So then they don't realize it, but nobody's taking them seriously because people see that. It's funny. I don't know. Sometimes leaving it alone takes care of it, but if you see it over and over and over again, you're just like, bro, do something with your life, man. Like, this is not the best use of your time.
Yeah, I like to invite people a lot of the time to make their own channel, because I think that's a fair, like, if somebody who had another channel and made a video about the same knife, proving the points that they think are right, that are opposite of the points I've made, I'd be so much more willing to have a discussion with that person. I'd invite them on for a podcast episode. Sure. Like, if there's a channel who has done a bunch of really positive Chris Reeve reviews, and I haven't because I don't like them, and they really disagree and it makes them mad, and they've taken the time to formulate their own thoughts in a way that they've made the same amount of effort that I have, then let's talk about it and be realistic about it. And we'll probably find a lot of common ground. And like, it is what it is. Maybe we'll hate each other. I don't care. But like, if you've done nothing other than leave a YouTube comment and you think your opinion matters the same amount as somebody who's like put all that work in, maybe that's douchey of me, but I don't care as much. I don't listen to you as much.
Exactly. Like, what makes people think their short little paragraph has any impact on it? Like, it's like and then they get after you if you respond back. They're like, so you saying I'm not allowed to leave my own comment and have my own opinion? No, you're allowed to.
Right.
But I'm also allowed to reject its validity completely and tell you that no part of me is going to be affected. Moving forward, absolutely nothing will be affected by this comment, and you can sit there and watch nothing be affected by it. Because why? Like, what are people expecting sometimes? What do they expect to happen? What was the best case scenario? It's like, you know what, Frank? I'm right. Are you right? I'm going to take this video down. I'm going to redo it the way that you want me to do it and say the things you want me to. I'm going to include your opinions just because you left a comment. No.
I can tell you how many times that's happened. 0 for anybody.
Yeah. Oh, man. But in the same stroke, though, I cannot sit here and pretend that I have not acted the same way periodically. That saying this type of stuff, I've definitely been a hypocrite before. And, during certain videos, I have preemptively sort of mocked people for thinking a certain way and almost presented it in a way, because I'll go back and watch my content. That's real cringy to do, isn't it? Go back and watch my content. I'll go back and watch my own content and go, oh, God, like, I presented that in a way that suggests that there is no other line of thinking. And that if anyone who disagrees with me, anybody who does disagree with me, is an idiot. And I was like, oh, no, that's the kind of stuff that I come down. So
I do that all the time.
Oh God, you
Which I,
do.
I think honestly that's the best way to get around that is just to say this is opinion here.
Yeah,
Like if I'm presenting everything as fact, then you lock yourself in a box of you have to
sure.
be right or there's like the consequences should be bigger. But if you're reviewing things from an opinion standpoint and you're not hiding the ball on that, then like if my opinion is kind of douchey, it's still just my opinion. Like
Right.
I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm just saying I think you're dumb if you do. And that's my opinion. Like I, that's more real than trying to pretend I don't
Yeah,
think that way in the moment. I can get around it sometimes and like start to see the other side and then I become, but we're all human,
sure.
and I think that makes it more fun to watch too when people are being like genuine and also a little bit rambunctious and saying the things as they come into their head instead of being super plated and
Yeah.
like that's why my this podcast works this way. There's no script. I don't have notes. There's nothing
Yeah.
we have to talk about. There's no topic that's off limits. Like it doesn't matter to me because
Obviously, it's working because I mean I'm very engaged. I would much rather hate, not hate. I would much rather strongly dislike somebody who I feel like is being genuine than absolutely love somebody and find out that they were being a yes man or just like saying what what they wanted me to hear. I mean,
yeah.
there's no respect that like I can dislike something and still have respect for it, or a person and still have respect. I'm like, well, at least they're being genuine. It helps me sort out whether or not I want that person to influence me moving forward. It's
Yeah.
quicker, it's more efficient. You cut to the chase. So yeah,
And you can admit when you've been wrong, which is the other important part.
yeah,
It's like, even if you took a really firm stance on something, if you find out you were wrong, if you have the ability to be wrong about it and
yeah,
open about that you were wrong, then like that's humanity, I think.
100%. I think it's a good idea to welcome if there is factual correction necessary. Like if I get a detail wrong about a knife, for example, I was somebody sent me they actually donated it, the Spyderco Spy Opera,
Mm,
and I looked at it, and I saw the pins. I'm sorry, I saw the screws on the scales. Most knives, I mean, whether they're lockback or not, with these modern knives, under the scales, if they're mounted in the middle, there are two additional screws on the frame that you can't see that are holding in the backspacer or the back lock, right?
hmm
So I do my normal thing, adjust the pivot, adjust. I'm like, oh, the body screws are T8. There's likely some T6 ones under there. Shouldn't be difficult to take apart. Somebody popped in and said, it's actually pinned. Like after I was done with the review, I didn't
mm,
actually take it all the way apart. The end result was all of the critical parts, as far as like taking it apart and doing maintenance, those all came out, right? The
hmm
blade and the internals, right? The frame itself, just the steel part of the frame was actually pinned together, but everything else came off the knife. So you could still do maintenance on it, but I appreciated that they said that frame is actually pinned, and I was incorrect, right? I'm never going to jump down somebody's throat and be like, don't tell me I'm wrong about stuff I'm actually wrong about. Even if they're a dick about it, then but I still want to know. Like I
Yeah.
still need to know so that moving forward, it's like now I'm like, okay, so knives like that I really need to check because I presented this information as if the entire knife came apart, and it turns out it didn't because I overlooked a small detail. So I still invite people, hey, correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Just try not to be a jerk about it for no reason. Because you can always tell, like, is the point of the correction, the main goal of your correction to be helpful, or is it
To
to
pull you down.
take an opportunity to go, look at me, I have the correct information and this buffoon doesn't? Because if that's the deal, then the whole point of it is just dumb. Like the way that they're going about it is, it's in my opinion, it's bad because it's like,
Yeah.
what you're serving yourself, right? It should be helpful. That's the whole idea, or at least that's my opinion is it should be helpful
I
for other
agree.
people.
And I
Yeah,
think you probably have a similar experience to mine where like the negative parts of a comment section tend to feel the loudest. That's the way the human brain works.
yeah,
But like I probably get one negative comment for every 15 positive ones. Like
right.
I get so much more where people are just supportive and like, "Oh, I like this," or they'll respond to something stupid that I said in the video and it's like a witty like we're joking back and forth now type of comment, and those are awesome and the compliments are great and like that it all comes together, right? The comment section, we've made it sound like it's all just a horrible battleground of people being a-holes, but there's a lot of positivity, at least in mine.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah. The vast majority of the comment section is positive because the people who are watching are mostly there to watch your content and continue to engage with you and interact, and they like your style. So most people are real positive, and I love reading those. I read through almost every single comment. I used to get a lot more triggered by comments, and it was probably during the initial, because there was a time. It took me 3 months to hit 100 subs and a year to hit 1,000.
oof,
And sometime after that, it started to really go up.
mhm,
And so I was getting a lot of stuff all at once, and I wasn't used to all these new people coming in. And so I was getting there was more positivity, but more negativity than I was used to. And I was getting a lot more triggered. Now, and probably moving forward, a lot of times I see something and I'm like, this is just today's salt, you know? So
yeah,
I'll just be like, okay, thank you. Thanks for letting me know that you didn't like it for this reason, you know? But you can tell whether or not you should be taking up somebody seriously, you know? So anymore, I try not to get really like into a boxing match with somebody in the comment section. Just kind of be like, that's fine, dude. Get in line. There were, this last month, there were 100 other people who were, you know, who were taking sodium tablets as a suppository.
right. Get in line.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's like I'd rather actively engage with the positive part of my knife community and then have that snowball, than
Totally.
I still do I still do get like triggered by negative comments every now and then. I can't pretend like I'm invincible, but I try not to because it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. On the occasions where a comment will actually get under my skin for a moment, I'll never respond to those until I'm able to look at it as funny. Like that's my personal rule is I can't, unless I'm having fun, not like actually angry, then I can't respond because I need to it needs to be from a place from me where it's lighthearted. And even if this person fires back again, I already have decided that it's just funny and they don't know me and it is what it is. But yeah, even
Sure.
then, sometimes certain comments that are just pure, like just vile, being mean for the sake of being mean, not even related to the video, those it's easier to just delete. And it's like,
Sure.
what are we even engaging about here? You're just here to be a dick.
Sure. Yeah. There's actually a great example. Somebody who's like pushing really hard in the live chat for something.
In our live chat?
Yeah. I've seen. I mean, like I know what the goal is, right? But I mean, you can see
Is it a US
there's
versus
one in
China
there.
thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's
So
always
that's
like you know. There's always like a constant like, oh, this'll get him because they don't want to talk about that. They
I'd be happy to talk about Chinese knives. I'm having a knife. I'm having a knife made in China. That's no problem with
and
it. Did you see Ben
honestly,
Peterson yesterday? He shared in his stories.
uh,
So I think it was last night. Maybe it was this morning, but he shared somebody in his comment section said something that was like not just anti Chinese government, which I agree with. I am 100% on board with. I think the Chinese government is vile, but it moved into like anti, like all Chinese people are bad. And so Ben responded in kindness, and Ben is fantastic in that way.
right,
But the party equals the people. That's not necessarily true of everybody. That's like saying that everybody in the U.S. is a liberal. That's, I mean,
right,
so yeah, I think every now and then it's a good idea to respond. And also like the idea of being mad at knife makers for choosing a Chinese OEM when America doesn't have an alternative isn't really that fair to the US designers. I'm one of them. I would have loved to choose a US OEM to make my product, and it does not exist. If you say Millet, screw you. Millet, at this point, I don't believe in their ability to make knives for any kind of reasonable price or on any kind of reasonable timeline or even consistent quality from what I've seen. Like, and they might not even take the business because they're one small shop. Like, there just isn't stuff going on here. And so to conflate that like Riat or we or Artisan or any of these companies are the Chinese Communist government, I think that's asinine, because I've talked to some of these people and a lot of them are very kind, very genuine people. I've met some of them in person at shows. Like, there are nice, good people who probably align more with you than they do with their own government, but they happen to live there. And so to slander these people on a human level is terrible,
Oh,
terrible thinking.
it's terrible. And on top of that is that the argument's always the same. I'm a very non-political channel, and to
Same.
anybody watching, if you think that you're about to get my political opinion, you're not. But I'm sure that it'll be spun, because people will take what they take from what you say. They'll hear what they want to hear.
People
They
assume
it's
because
like
I live in Los Angeles that I have
yeah,
to be a certain political party. And it's
yeah,
like, assumptions
yeah.
are,
And there'll be it's a natural response to simply reduce it to something that's so simple and so black and white, and that way it's easier to divide it up and take the part that makes sense or fuels your original argument and then proceed, right? So I'm not going to change anybody's mind, and I don't expect to. But yeah, it's as if as soon as we talk about, buy, whatever, interact with any objects or thing that's made in China, everything else is thrown out of the window, and we are automatically supporting the greatest evil that could possibly be imagined, and there's nothing else to be considered. That's how some people think. And by saying this, I don't want anybody to think that I'm coming down or judging anybody for coming to the conclusions that they have come to, but consider our perspective. I think that we're doing an injustice to, basically, it's about being honest. To ignore things that are made in a certain area just because there's, negative air, maybe with a big population of people, to ignore it completely and to pretend that it doesn't bring some type of quality to the table actually discredits the reviewer, right? If you ignore something completely, or if I pretend that this Riot made Sharp by Design Evo Typhoon is not a quality product, then who's to say, right? How can I sit here and pretend that that when I talk about quality coming from other products, right, that I'm not showing an extreme bias, right? Just to say that it's junk, or say I want to talk about everything. I want to be honest about where quality is. Quality is not about geography. I think it was Nick Shabazz said that. It's about effort, right?
mm-hmm.
It exists in lots of different forms, right? There are lots of things that you can buy that are made all over the world by people who will use that money to do bad things. And it has nothing to do with specific geography, right? Sometimes it's case by case.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I go about this. And that's as far as and like I said, people are going to take that. I wonder, oh no, okay, he's being all right. Yeah, see, no, but see, it is being reduced to, we are directly supporting the, which is, no.
Which is asinine.
Sorry. I mean, I know people are going to get mad when I wave them off like that, but no, that's just not correct. But what they want is they want a firestorm argument that involves, buckling to the original simple black and white foundation that they created the argument in the first place. And that's a big no from me, folks. That won't be. It's an absolute no, brick wall. But yeah, no, I'm definitely going to talk about what knives I think are quality. I've handled American knives that have felt like garbage. I've also handled American knives that are incredible. Russian knives, Shirogorov, incredible, right?
Yep.
Riot knives that are sometimes, in some cases, almost indistinguishable from Shirogorov knives, right? Japanese knives that are incredible, Italian-made knives, right? Knives from all over the place. Chinese knives, there's obviously junker Chinese knives, and there's obviously really well-made Chinese knives, right? So sometimes, money doesn't flow in exactly one direction. It never has, right? But I'm going to be honest. Unless, it has to be, pretty directly catastrophic to where I will say, no, thank you. I don't support clones, copies, direct theft, things like that. But if something is an original design and it is quality, am I going to tell people what I think? Well, yeah, definitely. So That's kind
Yeah.
of, I mean, and it's okay if you disagree with some. Obviously, I don't have to tell you it's okay. I know you'll tell me if you disagree with me, and I appreciate that. But
No,
I thought
I
maybe since we had an opportunity there in chat, we might bring that
sure.
up.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, the way I look at it is multiple things can be true at the same time, right? The Chinese government, I disagree with wholeheartedly. I think communism is bad. If that's a political statement, that's one I'm willing to make, even though I'm typically pretty apolitical. I think communism is bad, right? But I know plenty of Chinese people. I live in an epicenter of Chinese population in Southern California. The city that I live in, there's way more Chinese people than there are white people, which leads to amazing dumplings everywhere you go. But it's like, I know plenty of Chinese people who are fantastic, some of whom have only been here for a very small amount of time. I've also, now that I'm using Reat as an OEM, I've had conversations in depth with people who work at Reat on a somewhat personal level. It's my first time working with them, so it hasn't gotten that deep. But I've also met some of them at shows, and you like, these are people that I like, and I don't just assume that they're trying to push communism on the rest of the world as people, right? That can be the same thing. And like you said, there are American products that are garbage, and it makes me really mad when there's an American product that's being pushed on the merit of it being American, not on the merit of it being good. I think that is flawed thinking. If there is a better alternative for somebody on a budget, then the American knife shouldn't just be the one that gets picked because, oh, we're American made and there's a veteran that works here. If your product is garbage, my job as a reviewer is to call it what it is. And so I don't know. There's also like, it's so intermingled at this point. Like with my knife, this business, Luft Concepts, is here in the United States. Me and Ryan, we're partnered on it. We're both in the US. We design here. We use our 3D modeling guy that we use is here. We do as much as we can here. The problem is, as much as we can doesn't mean making the knife because there just isn't an option. And so you get these US businesses where the only part that they're outsourcing is the part that isn't available to them. And China is the best option right now for good quality manufacturing at a reasonable price to make you a lot of them and to do it quickly. It just doesn't exist elsewhere unless you look maybe at like Italy. But I've had less good experiences with Italian manufactured knives than I have with Reat. So it's like, I don't know. It also seems to always point just to China when like you said, Russia, the US hasn't always had the greatest political relationship with. And I don't see many people saying never buy Russian knives. Like,
No,
I,
a
I don't
lot
know.
of times I mean, like it's and in no way, anything that I'm saying here today, I'm not trying to present myself as an expert on, um, like almost like when we're talking about morals and just ethics, not a professional and I can't speak on that, right? All I can do is control myself and go off of what I believe. I believe in being honest, right? Not everything, in fact, nothing is absolutely black and white. There are always circumstances, no matter if you're, it's I think it's good, to try to buy American products, but to try to buy
Thanks, Ray.
quality.
You're the best. Sorry.
What these every day. What's up, man? Oh, hey, cool. Oh, man, Ray is awesome. But I do try to buy American products, but I try to buy quality American products, ones that I truly believe are quality. So the vast majority of my own purchases are, as my viewers know, it sounds so cringy, but my viewers, oh God, I hate saying stuff like that. The people who watch my channel enjoy
Yeah.
it, who probably watch a lot of channels, know that I like to buy Hinderer knives, right? I like to buy some of the other stuff like my Microtex and Zero Tolerance and American Spider Codes, right? Yeah, the Conagarius, wonderful, wonderful. But I believe in those products because in some cases, sure, they might, people are like, oh, they're overpriced, right? Well, you know what? They're incredible, like the quality that it brings. Even if my brain goes, this is a little bit more than I think it should be, but I'm happy to pay it because effort was put in here. This is a
Yeah.
real quality American product. On the other end, I'm not nearly as likely to buy something that's made anywhere else, let alone it's really in my mind. I try to buy American products, but if it's high enough quality, right? If it's that well made, in this case, designed by an American knife maker, Brian Nadeau, right? Company based in the United States.
And a
Yeah,
custom maker who makes customs here.
exactly. And that money that is being generated, I'm sure a lot of money is generated by these small batches of knives like this, is being put back into and helping to grow said business, right?
Yep.
And to capitalize, that's not the right word, to add to what you were saying about, somebody's first knife. How many of us started with inexpensive Chinese knives and had the doors open to quality U.S. knife companies
Yep.
simply because we became interested with those knives in the first place? Had the door never been opened, I can't tell you, and I'm not trying to flex, how much money I would not have ended up spending on some of these American products, which is why it's so hard to go, it's good and evil, and that's all there is, and it's only pick one. Like, man, watching too many early Disney movies, right? It's that.
And I have a ton of respect for people like Bill Koenig is a good example of somebody who I see on Instagram all the time making buying decisions for all the products he buys based on trying to source US versions. So like he'll buy US made New Balances instead of Nikes. He'll buy a US made part for one of his machines in his shop because it's US made. And he makes those decisions constantly. And I like that he does that because I agree. I would even pay more a lot of the time for a US made alternative. The problem is when there isn't a good alternative,
Right.
or when you're just shutting out like whole product lines in general. Like you said, as a reviewer, it's just not, I don't see it as the same thing as supporting communism. It's so far from it in my mind. And I don't see that as me rationalizing it either. I've really tried to take a look at it from the other side where these people are really locked in on its US versus the rest of the world, and knives are where I'm going to take that out on comment sections. And it's like, I don't see, like you said, there's so much that comes from US, that comes from starting with Chinese made stuff that oftentimes leads to US made stuff.
Right.
And so many of these Chinese made knives are US makers behind them that's who they're using for manufacturing. If there is a company that can make knives the level that Riat can in the US, I'd pay an extra $100 per knife to have my knives built there, and I'd charge an extra $100 per knife to have them sold here. And I would make that business model work because I know people would pay more for it. The problem is there isn't a manufacturer doing that's set up to make knives.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. So like, I don't know.
It's why I feel really good about loving Hinderer knives, supporting the Hinderer knife company. Are they expensive? Yes. But considering all the competition, let's just reduce it to the price point, $425. Somebody comes to me and says, Complex, I got $400, maybe $450 if I push it to spend on a knife. I want to know, as far as materials, performance, fit and finish, everything all together, the best possible value. It is so easy for me to say without any doubt in my mind. It's so easy for me to go buy a Hinderer. And not everybody loves Hinderer, and maybe you don't think the same way, but I love that I can honestly say, holy moly, Rick Hinderer is bringing insane quality to the table, even considering you have monsters like Riat bringing incredible quality to the table in the same price point. They got some great stuff. Anything that I can honestly say that I would recommend over a Hinderer for the same price? No. It's close, but no. I still recommend Hinderer, and I'm glad that I honestly feel that way. But I feel that way, after having handled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of knives. It feels really good to be honest with myself and the people who are watching to say that. But if I didn't actually think that, I would be honest. I would tell people, look, this is a level of value that we haven't seen yet. This is, and I would, I would absolutely be overjoyed when the day came when another American product met or, went beyond that level of quality that I could say, hey, there it is again. This is great, right? But you got to be honest, because otherwise credibility goes out the window, and then you can't, people don't know whether they can trust you or not, even if they agree with, there are people that I trust that I don't always agree with, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think along the same vein, the number one knife that I have recommended to people is the Koenig Arius. And that's a price
And it's
point that
amazing.
is bananas. So not a lot of
Yeah.
people are looking in that price point, but the number one answer I give to the question of like, what's one knife you'd recommend that people get if any knife out there, what is it? And it's the Arius. It's been my favorite knife for a long time. It's not impossible to get, although it's difficult to get, but it's for the money, I believe, the greatest knife that exists. And even when you stretch up to like the $1,000 mark, I still think a plain Jane Arius is better than probably any $1,000 knife I've ever handled or used. I adore the knife, and it's like it happens to be U.S. made, right?
Right.
But if it was a Shirogorov that was I found better and checked my boxes more, same thing. I would say the Shirogorov is better, but it's not. So I say the Arius is.
Right.
And I think, yeah, looking at you and I as reviewers, who that's the space we're dwelling in on this platform on YouTube. Our purpose is to review the things. It's most fair as a reviewer to look at all the options because the consumers are going to look at all the options. That's who we're trying to
Right.
inform, right? It's people
It's
trying to
not
make
like we
buying
do it
decisions.
because we tell them to. Nobody's doing anything because we tell them to. We exist as a, you know, here's a perspective, and there's a lot of people watching, but I mean, most of the people who are watching our channels are grown adults. If they don't agree with us, they're going to go, "Thanks for the video, nah," and they're going to go do whatever they. And there's no harm in that, right?
Right.
But I think a lot of people assume that because we have an audience, that people are just mindlessly like, yes, I will do what you say immediately. And this look at our comment sections. That's not what's happening. But
Right.
to pull back, the Koenig Arius, what do those start at? $550?
I think they're either about to go up or they just did. I want to say a plain Jane is now like $600.
Okay. So if someone said, what if I wanted to, let's say that same $450 argument, said, what if I wanted to bump up $500 or $600? I'm going to say Arius. The Arius, all the way around, is has better overall quality and precision than the Hinder XM18, but it costs more money, right?
Right.
And I agree with you there. It's kind of amazing to me that they only want $600 compared to everything else that's out there between there and your Shirogorov, your $1,000 knives.
Yeah, this
But
Quantum is an $1,100 knife table. I like the Arius more, and mine's a plain Jane.
so I went ahead and bought one. Do we have the same one?
So
The
mine
exact
started as a blue one, but it's been deanodized.
Okay.
So I think now they're the same. Yeah.
So this is one of the most perfectly manufactured knives that I've ever seen. It's beautiful. And I said in the review, and in my video of it, I bought it because I love how it looks. I'm happy to pay for this level of quality. Not 100% sure it's really worth $1,100, but it doesn't have an enormous amount of competition when it comes to absolute precision of a Shirogorov. A lot of people say, well, it's just titanium and M390. It can't be worth that much. The value in this case is not coming from just the materials. It's coming from, nearly unmatched precision work.
Yeah.
But Koenig is absolutely putting up a really good level of competition, right? If you want Shirogorov quality in an American-made knife, Koenig, and they're hundreds of dollars less, right?
Yeah, it's basically Koenig, or you could argue Holt is kind of on that
Sure.
level.
Yeah.
But it's funny too, because then you also, I don't tend to partake in this, but you tend to get a certain amount of like drama around US knife companies and knife makers as well within the community. So then even within the US makers, like there's a whole faction of people who I know will not buy a Medford because of Greg Medford. I won't buy one because I don't like the knives, but there are people who won't buy it. You name the company, there are people who will have a reason that they do not like that maker and they won't buy from them. And so
Sure.
it's like there's so many factions within the knife industry and the knife market. I think the current loudness of the don't buy anything Chinese is just kind of, it's loud.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of reasons that people will give you to not buy a lot of things. And sometimes it's quality, other times it's something totally unrelated from the quality, and I
Right.
tend to want to focus on the quality.
Well, and you're right about the loudness. I mean, look back to anybody who doesn't know. Go on Blade Forums and look at the good, the bad, and the ugly section where they talk about past dramas over the last 2 decades. What's happening right now and what's driving people to buy or not buy a certain thing is not necessarily a new atomic bomb. We've had lots of different dramas and as far as like what people will and won't buy from certain makers for one reason or another, or even certain areas, right? The knife world has seen this, and you know what? Eventually, we'll get to a new loud thing, a new reason not to buy something. There'll be a new drama, and it'll attract a few sane people and a whole bunch of people who are just ready to throw their torch on the haystack, and I mean, I'm not trying to like bring anybody down, but yeah, if I my basis for reviewing or not reviewing something is exactly like you said. I don't really care what else is going. Is the knife well made? Is it interesting? Is it like for the money or the materials that you're getting and the way that they're put together, right? How do I feel about it? If a certain maker's not doing something that's exciting to me, then I'm not really interested in doing a video on it because it's not fun for me. I'm doing this because I enjoy doing it and I like being honest and telling people what I think. So if something's not interesting or I don't think that it's going to be beneficial to talk about, then I'm just not going to talk about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like you. That's not my process for deciding who I will and won't work with, unless they're cloning stuff. Like if you're
Clones are a
cloning
hard pass.
stuff,
Yeah.
right? If you're cloning stuff and you're selling it, kick rocks. If you're buying clones and trying to pretend that you're trying to tell people like, hey, it's just as good for also kick rocks. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in any of that
The
whatsoever.
only patience I ever have for clones ever are when it's someone who's so brand new that they have no idea that it's a clone and they
Okay,
bought it because they saw it was cheap. And
sure.
then when they learn it's a clone, they depart from that way of thinking.
That
And I've known a lot of
totally,
people who bought
yeah,
Ganzo clones and stuff to start, and then they learn, oh, this is a knockoff of a 940. That's not cool. And then they
yeah,
throw it away or whatever they do. I had a Strider clone that I bought as a joke that it like years ago. And it was, I think I paid $13 shipped from China on wish.com for this Strider
yeah.
GG clone, right? And I bought it because I was in a chat with a bunch of other dudes who were really into Striders and I wasn't. And so I called it the stolen valor because there's always the joke about mixed stolen valor, which like,
Speaking of past drama, yeah.
yeah. And I've bought actual SNGs since. This hasn't stopped me from ever like having Strider made knives or whatever. But so I got this clone and it was a joke and it worked as a joke. It like for its hilarity and its time was great. And then for years it sat in a drawer and I didn't know what to do with it because what am I going to do with this stupid clone knife? So I took it up on one of my hikes and I stood at the top of a cliff and I did that thing where I like twirl it and I was like, check out this new Strider I got. And then I dropped it down a cliff and made it look like an accident. And then that reel on Instagram has an insane amount of views because so many people didn't know it was fake and didn't know
Oh
I did it
man.
on purpose. It was great. And so now a bunch of my friends call that Strider Canyon or Yeet Canyon because I yeeted it off.
Oh man.
And it's like
That's great.
that's what clones should be used for, is
Sure.
thrown into the depths of a canyon when you realize how despicable it is that
Yeah.
they exist. And it's like, I'm sorry I bought one in the first place. That probably wasn't a good thing to do, but it was when I
Sure.
was in the very beginning of the hobby. I knew it was a clone, obviously, but I bought it as a joke. They couldn't have made much money shipping it from China. It was a whole thing. And so it was like, it's gone now. I'll never buy
Right.
another one again. Clones disgust me. But
Yep.
yeah, this
No, I
Casper
don't
dude
think
will
there's
not shut up.
anything. I totally get that. People, not knowing and wanting to. I mean, like it's like I was always said. The moment that you walk through the door of the knife world, like you walk through the gates of the knife world, you are presented with the Ontario Rat and the Spyderco PM2. Those are
Yep.
like must right now. Any company who's cloning this, rework your business model. Like what really? But the PM2 clones exist of it. PM2 is $150 knife. So there's definitely going to be an appeal. You see this really cool knife that's all over Instagram and all over YouTube, but it's for 20 bucks, right? A new person is going to go, wow, great deal, because they don't know that most of the time it's going to be real fixed. Like a PM2 is going to cost. If it doesn't cost what it costs on every other site, you should be sketched out.
Well, yeah, there's map pricing on it. They can't go below a certain level on a real PM2. Yeah.
Right. You're not buying from a company who's being charitable or who's looking out for you or who's just trying to offer you a great deal. It also doesn't mean that Spyderco is evil and trying to rip you off. You're actually being ripped off by the clone company who's stolen the design and made it in a way that is lesser in terms of overall quality with lesser materials, right? And they are attempting to ride the coattails of the popularity of that item. And they have reeled you in with that, exactly, and made you think even, like, not with new people, but people who justify them, made you feel like a smart person for doing it, right? That's their marketing worked, and it's sad, which is why, people ask me, like, why don't you do videos on clones? Why don't you compare them, show people what to watch out for? It's because now
I'm to support it to have one.
Yeah, and because I don't want to draw attention for people who don't know that they exist. People will ask me directly in the comment section, where do I buy them? I don't want to say it. I want to show you stuff that's an original design that's good, right? That's actually worth it. That's the kind of stuff that I want to promote. The real stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
agree.
Yeah. Oh man, this I just looked at the time and I realized we've been talking for an hour and a half. It's crazy. I got lost in this.
It's the way it goes, man. Yeah, I think my longest podcast ever was like 4.5 hours. And sometimes that just happens. It's a good conversation. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So here's a question I like to ask reviewers. Let's switch gears a little bit. Because for me, it's certainly been the case. But since you started your channel, I know you'd already been collecting, but specifically, I'd imagine the frequency with which you were going through knives constantly ticked up quite a bit with the beginning of your channel. Have your tastes in knives themselves changed or evolved in any way, or have they remained pretty consistent?
So it's so funny. I just did an episode about exactly that. Yes, but not in a way that makes me depart completely from what I love. Like when you're in the discovery phase, it's like you jump from one thing to another and you decide, like, at first you're like, cold steel, at first you're like, as durable, it has to be so maximum durable that it can't be broken by any totally unrealistic use.
Big Lynn Thompson energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's fun. Like, that's cool. Like, sometimes I have knives that are massively overbuilt and I just enjoy them, but I recognize it as kind of a novelty, kind of an unnecessary, it's like an over-the-top thing. Sometimes you go full send on that. Sometimes you go like, you get really into like the ultra thin precision.
Gentleman's carry.
Yeah. Or you get into the steel thing, right? Or you get into balancing materials and that. Somewhere along the line, I really solidified around, like, I like a robust knife. Hinder knives, obviously, that really kind of settled in really well with me. So I have this like permanent attraction to knives that look a lot like this. Let me get. I like big, robust knives like the XM24. I like a monochromatic look. Titanium, the Demco and Hinder are not only similar in aesthetics here, these two particular versions, but they also have that kind of heavy duty American, like, I just like that feel.
Yeah.
That part of me will always exist, and I will continue to buy knives that are similar. But here lately, I've gotten into stuff that's not the same at all, other than the look, the Shirogras, and like the Rockstead was totally out of nowhere for me. Not normally a knife that I'd like. In fact, it's not on bearings. It's got carbon fiber on the outside. It's anodized, which is not something I normally go after. And it's got a mirror polished blade. It's the most expensive knife that I own, but for whatever reason, I use it because I just love the amount of effort that they put into making that blade a cutting monster. The convex down to a zero edge, the incredibly high Rockwell hardness that they apply to that ZDP 189.
They do like 67 RC, don't they?
Yeah, and it will cut forever, and it's incredible. I mean, well beyond what ZDP 189 is capable of on average. The
Hmm.
cutting performance of that goes well beyond my Maximate Para 3, and into the realm, into the celestial realm of the unheard of or difficult to get a hold of Rex
It's like Rex
121.
121. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, that's amazing. And it proved to me, it really finally clicked in my head. Any composition, I think Pete from Cedric and Ada made the steak analogy about how, a less than premium starting cut of steak could be seasoned properly and cooked perfectly to become something, in a tier that's it's much higher than what you would expect from said cut of meat. And I was like,
Right.
that's a perfect analogy. But apply it to something like ZDP 189, which is already kind of a upper tier super steel, and then cook it and spice it just right, and it becomes this incredible legendary thing. Get geometry just right. And I was like, that's so cool. It's so interesting, right? So to me, I'm not gonna say it was absolute. There's still a part of me that's like, oh God, I spent too much on that. But I do appreciate it. I can't sit here and tell people that 15 that you should rush out and spend 1,500 on a Higo 2.
Yeah.
But it is very cool. It's very interesting, and nobody else. There's nothing else really out there that comes like that. So I was drawn to the interest to that was really, really powerful. So
I dig it. Yeah. I think for me, it's been a similar evolution. And I think looking at those knives you're highlighting, a lot of them have subtle intricacies that are not very noticeable unless you kind of get to a certain depth or do a ton of research. And so when you're starting out, the value of that knife isn't there because you just don't see it. Like
right,
it's impossible to perceive. And so like this is a good example. The other day I was showing my prototype of my knife to a buddy who is friends with me, so he knows a little bit about knives, but he's not super into knives, right? This buddy I gave a bug out to, and that's like the knife he carries all the time. So that's kind of as high as he's gotten within knives. He's been carrying it for like a year. I showed him this prototype, and there were things on it that to him were like, why did you make that choice? Why did you do that? Why he didn't understand why a hole. He's like, it's really not that easy to thumb flick this. Like, what's the purpose of the hole on the knife? And it made me think like, by nature, when Ryan and I designed this knife, we designed it for enthusiasts because we designed it for us and we're
right,
enthusiasts. So there's
yeah,
features all over this knife that like, if you noticed not being a knife guy, you'd probably be puzzled as to why those choices were made. But to us, it's like very specific. Like
right.
these are the things we like in a knife. And I think my collection has done that over time too. I've gotten even the knives that aren't like my favorite, where it's like this Scarab 2 Shadow all DLC. Like
That's awesome.
I'm not going to keep this knife forever, but I'm really enjoying it because it occupies a unique space in my collection. Not everything has to be the ultimate user anymore because I've got ultimate users and I have for a
Sure.
long time. Like I've got my
Yeah.
use bases covered. So now I can chase things like Shiros or Holtz or Koenigs, or like I've got this Monroe custom that's like, this knife is way too expensive, but it's got silver inlaid in the pivot and the milling is insane. And it's like,
Sure.
those don't actually make it worth the 1550 I paid for it, but to me they do. Like on paper it makes no sense, but the deeper you get in, the more you just want those little unique aspects of each
And
knife.
it's worth exponentially more to have, I mean, just a minor detail that's different. Yeah, it cuts, it flips. It is made out of M390 and has been, it's the little tiny details when you go past that point. The stuff that, as you continue to play with and use knives that are good, and you start to go, that could have been a little bit better, or that could have that corner, and knives that like are that, but then have with these slight changes. You're like, oh, that's what I was talking about.
It's the
That's
last 5%.
right. That's 250 up from what that other one costs. Okay, let's go ahead. And I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to reduce, like, say $250 is not a small amount of money, because when I buy a knife, I can't just. I have to sell something, right? But I will do that. I will sell what I need to sell to acquire that small step up, because that's the new level of quality that I'm after, or that new experience that I'm after. Hey, can I run up upstairs and make sure the door? My wife's coming home in a sec. I want to make sure
Yeah,
my door's unlocked. It'll take me like 2 minutes. I'm sorry. I'll be right back, guys.
you're good. You're good.
Okay. I'll be right back. 1 sec.
This is my chance to talk about you. So I actually will. I have followed Metal Complex for a long time now. I remember kind of like Slicey Dicey when I had him on the podcast. There was a time when I worked an office job and I watched a lot of knife YouTube because I was in an office by myself. What can I say? And he's one of those channels that I just appreciated for his way of providing information in a way that was interesting to listen to. And so I've been really excited for this podcast because I think he's a good example of being a channel that strikes a balance between totally informational and like more so than me, he gives a lot of specs and details that I don't even take the time or care or attention to give. But he also presents information in a fun way where you get to know him as the presenter, and he shares opinion and is open about it being opinion. And I don't know, I've just always resonated with that. So this has been a fun way to get to know him here on the podcast because we've really only talked very little in DMs before this. This is fun. There are some questions in here. I guess I'll take a moment to answer some of them as well. Oh, you're back.
Right.
I was talking smack about you the whole time you were gone.
I mean, that's what I expect. I'm just kidding.
So Knife Nerdery, I don't know if you've heard of him, Metal, but I call you Metal like that's your first name.
Yeah.
So he's a new channel, and he's one of those people who comments paragraphs at a time, but it's amazing. He is fantastic at like breaking apart knives and looking at them so in depth compared to the average person. I like, he's going to be on the podcast soon because I really like the way his brain works. Cool. But he's talking about the law of diminishing returns here, which is kind of what we were just on about.
Yep. It is diminishing returns, but it's so funny. It's like it's not like we pretend that we're getting more or we're getting the equivalent of what we're putting into it. Some people feel more strongly about elements and it makes the additional cost worth it. But it's like, we know it's a small change or it's a small element that you're paying a lot more money for. But as you climb the ladder, there's less and less and less that, really, in my eyes, equates to that additional value. But you feel compelled to chase it. And no matter how long it takes, like, it's not like I'm constantly buying knives that are, way, way, way more money just for the sake of scratching the itch. I want that itch to actually get scratched. I don't want to just kind of mess with it. Like I'll wait and hunt down something. I'm like, that's what I was after. It's an incremental difference, but I like it. And it's worth it. The entire thing together is worth it to me, getting it in the complete package, even if it's just a little bit different. But yeah,
I think the potency of your dollar is what goes down, right? It's not that spending more stops getting you anything more.
Right.
It's that it's such a small percentage of increase for how many dollars you're putting in. But yeah, I've kind of been that way too. Like the Shadow is a perfect example, or the Scarab Shadow. This knife cost like $200 more than the regular version for DLC. That's stupid. It's not worth having DLC for that amount of money. But to me, like, if I'm going to be spending over $500 on this ridiculous OTF anyways, I'd rather get the one that makes me the most excited. That is a diminishing return at that price difference, but it's like, I'll enjoy it enough that I'll get it. And plus there's also a certain level of like being somebody who buys and sells and trades a lot. Sometimes spending that extra amount makes it more desirable because there were only a couple hundred of these made. So now if I do turn around and sell it later to fund something else, I won't lose on it. I'll at least hold my value. And to me, that's like, I'll tie more up in it, but I'll be able to get it back out more easily. And there's a lot of like subtlety too to how knives are priced and what they do on secondary, and learning to read the market for me has been a big part of collecting because I have to sell in order to buy. That's the way it works.
I think that pride of ownership element too, it eases the pain of a potentially overpriced, right? Because I have a Scarab, and I would pay more money for the one that you have, just because you're exactly right. There aren't a ton of Scarab 2s out there, but
Right.
yours is cooler than mine, hands down.
And their
Some people,
DLC is sweet.
oh, that's beautiful. The coolest finish are those, a matte DLC, but you've got a partially reflective DLC there.
You can
That's
still see the
interesting.
grind lines in the
Yeah.
steel. Yeah.
So I have this guy, the 24 with the tumble, but I also have a much rarer, way rarer Dark Horse in a tumbled DLC. I call it Dark Horse. It's an XM24 in a tumbled DLC,
Mm-hmm.
and there are like out of less than 8. And I know that, right? There's no advantage to that knife over this knife in terms of capability.
Right.
And in fact, the funny thing is the Thai one actually costs more.
Hmm.
But if I didn't own this knife and somebody had it up for more money than this Thai XM18, would I pay for it? Yeah, because of those other elements that are valuable to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell other people to rush out and spend it or that it's going to be worth it. But when it comes to me and what I will pay for and for what reasons, it's totally personal,
Yeah.
So it's funny how we are partially able to separate that when we're reviewing things, because you'd think like, well, how the heck am I supposed to trust a review if your personal sense of value fluctuates so much,
I think a good example though is like, can you still review a budget knife even though you've got these crazy nice knives and do it in a balanced and fair way? And that's something I try to think about every now and then, is like, if I pick up whatever new Civivi model just came out for $60, which I rarely do because I just don't find them interesting. But if I do, could I review it for its merits as a knife? And the few times where I've gotten something relatively budget end of the spectrum, I found that I still totally see value in them. If anything, spending a ton on a knife, then when I get a good budget knife, it makes me really value it, because it's like, oh, this is pretty freaking good for costing a tenth of what I spent on a lot of other things. It makes them really shine.
Man, I was like that with the Imperium. Sorry, it went backwards here because of the camera. But this is such a, like, look up the word knife in the dictionary.
There it is.
But they went with Nitro V. They made it a front flipper, right? They got the thumb studs in the right place. Smooth. I mean, the traction and like where they did the texturing and they did this kind of faux bolster thing. I was like, man, there's some cool elements here, and it carries light. It's got good ratios. Like, this is a good knife. And I got really excited over this really straightforward, simple little object. A lot of stuff in Civivi's line. I mean, obviously they kind of do that. They make straightforward tools that have a simple aesthetic, and then they change little elements and make it slightly, they do that, which is why a lot of their stuff is less interesting to anybody who's handled a lot of it. But this one stuck out to me, and I got excited about those little details, and it was fun for me to be like, I appreciate this, and it makes me want to carry it, despite having knives in my collection that cost way more money that I carry. It just makes me respect and appreciate that design. It's fun, So
yeah, and I think inherently, even though we can get in the weeds about like the intricacies of these really nice knives, we can also still hopefully always look at them as the tools that they are. And that's where like the budget end of the spectrum shines. It's like, how much function can I get out of this thing? And I don't just mean like cutting ability. I mean, how good does it fidget? That's important these days. How well does it carry? And like all of those same things still have to be true on the high end. So finding that they are true on the low end, it's like, I don't know, there's value there, and that's fun to talk about, is when you find a good value. Like the Tau. I don't know if you've seen these. I pre-ordered this knife for $134 on Kickstarter. It has a Timascus pivot collar. It's M390. It's a titanium frame lock, the good deep carry clip, and it's made by Kunwu Knives. They're newer. It was $134 for an M390 frame lock with a Timascus collar. It's bananas. And
that's amazing.
It's got a great action, nice and smooth, front flips. It's like I was really, really excited to find out this knife was good because I bought it on a whim, being like, it's probably going to suck. But it's not that big of a risk if it does. And then find out it's like, oh, this knife, if it was a Wii, which it feels the same level of quality to me, this would be a 200 plus, maybe
Absolutely.
$250 knife. And yeah, it's like you find those things that are kind of gems in their range and they're great. It's like the Arius for me. The Arius is the best in its range and even punching above its weight class. So when you find knives that do that for the space that they cost, it's really exciting.
Yep. Yeah. And that's really what we're seeking out, like all the time. I'm not only looking for the next thing to scratch an itch for me, right? Just because of what it is. Like there are times where I will absolutely pay more than what I think the item is worth just to have it because I think it's like, ooh, it's doing something special. But it feels equally good, if not better, to find something that is an absolutely incredible design with great fit and finish, ease of manipulation, everything's just in the right spot. Then you find out that they don't want very much for it, and you're like, this is just wonderful. And it makes me want to carry and use that over, even in some cases, designs that are more utilitarian. I'm like, no, I want to carry this and use this because it's so like, it's impossible that it exists at this price point,
Right.
right?
Everyone loves a good deal. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's great. And I mean, let's be real. I mean, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the reasons that I enjoy some of this stuff is that, yeah, it might be capable of performing a certain way, you know, in an infinite number of different circumstances, right? Might be made so perfectly to perform in such a specific way. I'm just carrying my knives to the grocery store and cutting open Amazon packages here and there. And periodically it'll get a slight workout in the backyard. If I got some crap to do in the backyard, I always make the example, my dogs dig holes all the time. So I'm constantly burying chicken wire, right? So you have the new chicken wire and you got to clip the little zip thing off of it. And then you got to open the bags of dirt, and you got to dig and then you got to, so that's like that type of stuff is like the most workout my knives will get. Or if I have to, I don't know, shape wood or cut a piece of rope or something like that, maybe. But
Yeah.
I more enjoy what something is capable of, and then it's combined with elements like fidget factor and the finish work and the value and all that. When all that comes together, you're just like, feel so good about having it. Just say that to yourself in your head while you're shopping for bananas. I got such a cool knife in my pocket right now.
Yep. If there's a pocket check here in the supermarket, I will win.
I will win. Don't everybody, if you have a pocket knife, don't even try. Go back to what you're doing, but I've already won.
Jokes on all of you. You came to the wrong store. Yeah, so that brings up a point that I try to make sometimes surrounding myself and just use in general, because you've got the whole use your stuff crowd, right? There's always that guy who, when you talk about fidget factor, it triggers them.
Uncle Randy, yeah.
So be it, right? And one thing that I like to talk about, another way it comes up is in the steel discussion. And I'm not knife steel nerds. I'm not Larry Thomas. I'm not a metallurgist, right? But I enjoy trying new steels and testing them out to an extent, not in a scientific way, but just personally. And I like knowing that my knife has a really, really good steel on it. It does something for me. It helps me make buying decisions sometimes. I have a hard time paying a lot of money for steels that I see as inferior, like 154 CM being used on $1,000 customs irks me because, like, use a better steel. It's 2021, and
it's funny.
My philosophy behind it is like, if I buy a brand new Porsche, if it's any 911, it is going to be really fast. I think the base Porsche 911 right now has like a 3.6 seconds 0 to 60. The base, not even a Carrera S, just 911 Carrera.
Wow.
Well, like, that's fast, right? And that's a rear engine, 6-cylinder, water cooled. They're cool motors, right? But just because a lot of people buy Porsches and don't track them or drive them hard doesn't mean that Porsche puts the flat 4 from the Boxster into the base 911, because when you're buying a 911, you're still buying a certain level of performance, whether you use it or not. And the
Sure.
idea that a lot of people like scapegoat the steel argument by saying, yeah, but most people don't use their knives hard anyways. It's like, if I buy a Ferrari that's supposed to have a V12 in it because it costs $300,000 plus, I expect a V12. You can't just
Yeah.
like sneak the lower engine into a
Right.
nice car because people don't drive it hard. That's, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, dude, that's so right. And like that's one of them. That's one of those comments that irks me. Like that's an example of a comment that will get me triggered enough to respond. Right. So here's how you guys troll me. tell me, tell me that people don't use expensive knives with
Right.
high-end steel. Tell me, because what they're actually saying is, I've never bought a knife that I wanted to use in a steel like that because I'm not at the point where I feel okay about causing wear on an item that I spent an amount of money that I'm not, that's what they're saying. Your world is so limited to your own perspective, yet they're fully ready to go, everyone or no one, right? They automatically assume is, what are you basing that on? There are tons of people who use, high-end ultra steels or who carry $500 knives, $1,000 knives, 2,000. Everybody, no, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to say that no one does, I mean, there's way too much proof, right? I mean, if we're talking about $500 knives, you think every other guy who's carrying a hinder is using it, right? But
Yep.
people who just saw it for the first time, who are just barely able to fathom the idea of a knife costing $500, their first assumption is that no one uses it,
Right.
right? So it's asinine to type that up and to assume that, right? Now, was there a time where I thought that? Yeah. I remember thinking people must not be using these knives because I'm not comfortable with it yet. But then you get past that point and then you start using it. You realize other people do use it and you go, guess I was wrong, right? So it's one of
Right.
those things where it's easy for me to critique that and be like, those people are wrong. But it's because I've been there. I remember thinking like, what? How do these knives get so expensive? There was something else I wanted to say and then I got off rant and rave because you gave an example of a trigger comment for me.
You're good. If you think of it. So there's a good example of this is my buddy Nick Rogers. He's the guy behind Niche Designs. I don't know if you've heard of him. He makes those steel shirts that say they're like ampersand shirts with steels on them.
I
Anyway,
think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
so he's a great dude. He's designed a knife that didn't come to market. Now there's other things he's working on. He's been on the podcast. I talk to him all the time. He carries and uses and has now for a couple of years a skiff. I think it's the Accomplice, and he got it at USN The Gathering like over 2 years ago. And he specifically opted for the Damasteel blade because at the time, if you got non-Damasteel, they were using 154 cm, I think, and the Damasteel was actually had greater edge retention properties than what they were using on the non-Damasteel version, which isn't usually the case. Usually, I'm not into Damascus because it tends to be the inferior performing steel and just looks cool. But on
It's
his,
usually the average of the two steels coming together. So if you're using something, two steels that are, maybe one is the equivalent of 154 and one is a lower equivalent, then you end up with the average, or in this case, less than the same performance as 154. So yeah,
exactly. So he picked the Damasteel because for them at the time, the Damasteel they were using was actually better for performance metric than the non-Damasteel version. And that has been his primary carry and use knife ever since he got it. If you catch him working in his garden, if you catch him doing food prep, if you catch him cutting a bunch of boxes, that is the knife he uses. And that had to cost, I don't know, $1,500, something like that. And he doesn't have like this huge collection of customs. He looked at it from the perspective of like, I want to get one and have it be my knife. And that's a totally respectable way to buy a knife. But I
sure.
think that it makes me more frustrated with the fact that Skiff wasn't just offering a really, really good steel to begin with, because there's a buyer out there who wants to buy it to use it. And so many people scapegoat it by saying, well, people aren't going to use it hard anyways. We might as well use the steel that's easy to work with or looks cool. And it's like performance matters to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
even if I don't plan to use something that hard, like my Monroe custom, this is S90V. I personally love S90V. This knife could have cost a lot less and probably would sell just as well. They're impossible to get, but it drives my buying decision on it, knowing that if I use it, which I've used it a relatively limited amount because I'm pretty sure I'm going to sell it, but if I were to use it hard and carry it, I know that S90V is a steel that I like, and it's going to perform way better than 154 CM or CPM 154. Like those steels should be on lower price points at this point is kind of the way I feel.
I'll tell you what, I agree with you there. CPM 154 and 154 CM are my favorite user compositions all the way around. My favorite steel because of the balance. I've sharpened 154 CM. The reason I lump them together is because I found that, through talking with ProTech and even reading some of Larry Thomas's stuff, that the original composition in the ingot form, the 154 CM, it's fine grained to begin with and doesn't have, a lot of times with the powder process, like in D2, the difference between ingot D2 and CPM D2 is pretty like the carbide formation and the composition, right? You get that even distribution and it increases the potential cutting performance by a lot. But with 154 CM and CPM 154, it's not the same thing.
The narrower margin,
right? So you get a slight increase in toughness. Other than that, they perform about the same. So, but I love them because they're so easy to sharpen and they take such a fine edge, and you can beat on it and do whatever you want. So, but am I ready to fork over 500 plus? No. Even if I might get less of a utilitarian benefit out of that knife, I still want to get my perceived level of value, even if it comes in more exotic. Like the car analogy is perfect, right?
Yeah, if you're buying an exotic car, it better not have a freaking Dodge 4-cylinder motor in it.
No, you know what? I don't need a 500 horsepower vehicle to commute, but like that doesn't mean that I'm gonna pay for the exact same thing and have it underperforming just because I don't need that extra performance. No, you better give me that 500 horsepower motor so that I can periodically, hammer down on the pedal for no reason, right? Like, it's just sometimes even if you're never going to drive that car, even if it's just going to sit in your garage, you're just going to look at it, knowing that you got that even just, in your mind, like the hypothetical capability of the object, right? And it's like the person who decided to buy it, it's their money. So their reason for enjoying it, their reason for seeing value in it, whether or not they use, that's why I have such a problem with the hashtag use your stuff crowd.
You can swear if you want to. You're good.
Okay. Get ready, folks. The hashtag use your shit crowd. I literally never said. That's why I'm trying to make a big deal out of it. When in reality, I swear like every other word. But yeah, that's why I have such a huge problem with that. He's like, don't tell people how to like formulate their sense of value. Don't tell people that they can't truly appreciate an object without using it the way that you see, right? Because it's like, that's not your money, dude. Like, don't worry about other people's money. Like, let them spend it how they're gonna want, unless you're trying to buy clones.
Right.
Hashtag don't buy clones.
Yeah. Well, and another element to that too is like, if these people who are that hashtag user shit crowd, if they're really trying to exclude people who don't use it, right?
Yeah. That elitist mentality.
If they actually got what they wanted, that wouldn't be good for them even. Like, there are collectors of knives who help to drive the knife market forward. I think most people who are in the hobby want more people in the hobby and not less, because it's good for the market. It means there's more exciting things that come out. And so I'm not somebody who buys knives to just put them in a case and then keep them as a collection or an investment or whatever. But those people don't make me mad at all. I'm glad that they're around because it helps my hobby to move forward. And especially now, like, as I'm getting ready to launch a product, like as I've got a knife that's coming out personally, I don't care whether people are going to use it or not. I'm building it so that, or designing it. Riyad's the one building it, but I've designed it and having it made by someone who's going to build it correctly so that if they use it, I'm very confident they're going to love using it. But if someone wants to buy my knife as a collection piece to just sock away in a drawer and keep until it's worth a lot more, hopefully that happens one day. Like, that's a huge compliment. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
People who do that with every Spyder Co.
I didn't know you were making a knife. You should send it. I want to look at it.
I will. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So like, I have disdain for the people who are trying to make the space more exclusive than it needs to
Yeah.
be by like, I don't know, like if someone wants to buy knives and that's the thing they collect instead of stamps, that's way cooler. Like let them collect what they want to
Yeah.
collect. You should be glad that they're picking the thing that you also like, whether they're batoning with it or not.
Sure, sure. Man, like the whole elitist and sectioning off certain parts. First off, I don't believe anyone is a true purist. Like if we talk about, and it just my perception of the knife world is again, you have users, collectors, and enthusiasts, but most people are hybridizations, right? You might have some hardcore people who are like, some of the people in the hashtag use your shit category, right? Maybe they do get the maximum amount of enjoyment out of using all their knives, right? But let me throw an equation at you. You're telling me, right, that you have enough experience with everything else that is out there, right? And you are so robotic in the way that you think, so purist in the way that you don't think that there's any knife in existence that could bring your thought process up to a level that might be, I want that, but I don't really want to use it. You're telling me that you know enough and have seen enough that there's nothing out there. There's at least one for everybody, right? I mean, that's the whole, what's the law? Same law that you throw monkeys in a room and give them infinite time, they'll write Shakespeare, right? What's the, you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you mean. Now it's going to bug me that I can't think of the name of it.
It's like anybody who thinks that they are so perfectly resilient to any other type of thought process, you're kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself, right? I thought that as the price of my acquisitions went up, I would be less likely to use them. Then I got the Rockstead. For whatever reason, I got knives that are safe queens that are less expensive. For whatever reason, I use the Rockstead, no problem, right? So I think the best thing to say, I always try to talk with new people because I remember how frustrating this world was when I was new and how like elitist some sections of it were. Assuming anything too quickly, especially in the knife world, will it immediately, like, or at least at some point, lead you down a path that's incorrect. If you assume something to be factual, you're basically already wrong. Like, because
Right.
the knife world will surprise you over and over and over and over again. It'll take a collector and turn them into a user, or a hybridization. It'll take a knife user and turn them into somebody who appreciates enthusiast elements that they never thought that they would appreciate, right? So it's like when I see stuff like that, I'm like, what is this stupid hashtag use your shit club, right? Like, what is this, man? Like, it's like use it if you want to, or don't use it if you want to. It's you paid for it. Enjoy it for the reason you want to enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, I think an element too for us as reviewers is like, as long as we're being honest about how much we've used a thing when we're talking about how it works in use, then like that's what should be expected of us too. Because there are knife reviewers who, like Ray, who was commenting earlier. Ray's a perfect example of like, I've talked to him privately about this before, where sometimes he feels bad, like he's not a real knife guy because he's not using his stuff that hard. And it's like, don't get me wrong, I can be a hammer in search of a nail when I've got a knife I want to cut with, and I'll find reasons to cut with it. But like, as long as he's doing his review and he's saying, I've used this on tape and cardboard and my cutting experience has been X, then that's way, way, way better than trying to pretend you're using it harder than you are, or not talking about what you've used it for, saying it's the ultimate best cutter in the world. Like, as long as you just walk people through how much you use your stuff, I would be willing to bet 80% of my viewers, the people who watch my channel, probably use their stuff maybe a little less than me. Is that me being like, I'm a user? Like, no, but it's fair to not, by that same logic, there's 20% of people who watch my channel who probably use their stuff way harder than I do. Maybe that's an even higher percentage.
Man, I did not know how much you and I thought exactly the same. It's so, you literally divided like use the same exact percentages. I'm not saying that 80-20 is that, considering the grand scheme of 0 to 100%, that it's really that unlikely. But 80%, I've always said, I think 80% of the people in the knife world are just enjoying the hobby as casual knife users. We don't really need anything that precision, but we're buying a lot of this stuff because it's interesting. The other 20% are probably needing a specific tool, right? They need a specific steel. They have a lot of experience and have figured out exactly why they need this so they can go out and use it and put it through its maximum paces. That really feels like it is probably the way that it is. But you're right. I just did a video about my experience with Maximate over 2.5 years. Believe it or not, this I'm gonna talk about exactly what you talked about. Where is it? It's right here. Maximate Para 3.
I have the same Para 3. Yeah.
And I found out that I love the performance of Maximate. I also don't mind the fact that it's not very stainless. It has a light patina on it, but not bad. It's mainly out here in Kansas. I don't have to worry that much. I've been stropping this thing back to life, just 50 to 100 per side. It hasn't fatigued the edge yet. Haven't sharpened it though. So I did a video saying I have a crap load of experience cutting with it. Seems to be doing pretty well, but I don't have any experience sharpening with it yet. And it's really important to say, right? Like with steels like 154, S35EN, M390, M4 Maximate, I have some experience with those. Sometimes sharpening and using, sometimes just cutting with it. But when I talk about a steel like Vanax, I'll have to defer to, somebody like Laren Thomas and say, I don't have enough experience with it to tell you exactly how it's going to act in however many different environments. But this is what I've read. This is what I understand and why the composition is interesting. I think anybody who presents information like that, I mean, number one, it's honest, but it's much more helpful to the viewing audience than pretending, based on what I've read, I used it and it did exactly that. It's okay to say, I haven't actually discovered this for myself, but apparently it's supposed to function like this, like that. That's how it should be.
So on that same thread, I totally agree. I think, especially if you're citing like who the expert is, that's the best thing to do, because it would be wrong to pretend that you know everything. None of us do. But Laren Thomas is right now, I would say, the foremost authority on metallurgy in the world of knives. His book is fantastic. He started doing videos now, which is great. Like, he's phenomenal, but
he's funny too.
Yeah.
It's funny. I love it.
And he's created a new steel, which I can't wait to try. But like,
MagnaCut. God, it even sounds cool.
But so on the subject of Vanax, that's a subject I've tackled quite a bit because I own a couple knives in Vanax. It started with the Quiet Carry Waypoint, and then I got SPK Shark in Vanax. Before he did this big run of them, he did 2, and I got one of them, which was really, really cool. And then I also have the Quiet Carry Drift. And with the Waypoint and the Drift specifically as folders, that's what I carry most of the time. Any time that I've had either of those knives in my pocket and I've seen water, whether it's a gutter or a fountain or the ocean or a stream or a pool or the sink, whatever it is, if I'm by water when those knives are in my pocket, I get them wet, I submerge them, and then I put them back in my pocket wet. And I've done that for months at a time with them. And I even, with the Waypoint, I like left it in lemonade for an hour one time, which is a little acidic. Like, I've tried to see if I could get them to rust. And so all of that is anecdotal. That's just me not being a scientist, but I love talking about that when I talk about those steels because I've actually done it. But what I'm not doing is saying, like, I can personally promise that this will never, ever, ever rust on you. I can just say what's happened to me. Right. And so it's easy to like talk in absolutes, but it's dangerous to do so. So I try to.
Dude. Yeah, it's super dangerous because like like people, number one, like if you try, you might get away with a fragment of it, but you're bound to eventually, it's like a grasshopper on an anthill. You're okay for a second, but you better get out of there because once one of them figures it out, it's everybody. I just bought I'm having a custom knife made, and I think I've said this on a live stream. I'm having the blade made out of Damacore, and
which is Vanax at the core, right?
I believe the composition is because Vanax is proprietary through some specific company. Is that right? And so what what the Damasteel company is using for the core, the composition is, it's probably an analog like how 204P is to M390, but the silicon
Right.
is not the same. But it's the same idea, and then it's jacketed by Damasteel, and I'm so excited because everything that I've read about Vanax is that it's almost an impossible outcome. Like I've always viewed, and you can correct me wherever, because I'm just somebody who likes to read a lot about steel, and I have a little bit of experience with use, right? But I've always viewed steel composition as a multi-directional teeter-totter, where if
Yep.
you pull one end out, then it comes right. That's why we don't have a perfect steel.
You can't have tens across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that Vanax can apparently be heat treated. And this is I remember watching a video on Cedric Aneta's channel. He was getting results. You know, if you take like a decently well heat treated M390 blade, he was testing a specifically heat treated Vanax blade against that M390, and it was coming out with higher edge retention, but it was also still fairly easy to sharpen, totally stainless, and tougher than M390. And I was like,
How?
what? That throws my whole multi-directional teeter-totter concept out the window. And I'm sure there's some science magic in there that
I think
Thomas would understand that I
what
would.
could have also happened is that M390 had a poo-poo heat treat, which happens.
Right.
But
right.
That's the thing that bugs me too. In the steel discussion, like this is specifically where I've seen it the most is revolving around Chris Reeve knives, because people like to act like Chris Reeve knives has this magical, incredible, mythical heat treat for S35VN, which is asinine thinking. It's not. Heat treat is either nailed or it's not for a certain Rockwell, and they do a good job with their S35VN, but I think it's even been pretty open that they intentionally run it a little soft for more toughness. So it's not even really edge retention focused, which for some people it's better to have more toughness. But regardless, I've seen so many people say, well, Chris Reeve S35VN is better than a bunch of the M390 that's out there because they're botching the heat treat. And it's like, stop it. Let's talk about the M390 that's heat treated properly.
Right, exactly.
And then we'll compare.
Like this cheeseburger tastes way better than a raw potato. Right? I would much rather. It's like,
or even tthen another raw cheeseburger. It's like
you should go try it against another really good cheeseburger. Like, why are you biting into a raw potato, you idiots?
Exactly.
But you know, it's so spot on. The whole concept of something just being a magically better heat treat. I mean, a company can consistently do a good job with heat treating a knife in a way that they want to, based on the design and the geometry of the blade. In some situations, running a blade softer because of the geometry will make sense for the application that it was designed for. Or in other cases, you might have a different type of geometry, and you might have different. Oh, there's Stasa.
What's
awesome.
up, Stasa?
Yeah. You might have a blade that's got a different type of geometry and that's meant for a different purpose, right? And they might favor hardness, by extension, edge retention for that composition, which it's all, we could talk about steel forever. That might work better, right?
Right.
I think people, number one, they get on this like higher Rockwell is always better across the board for every steel and every application. And by extension, better edge retention is king, and it means superior performance over everything else in every circumstance, which is not true, but then they view it blindly too. They take that concept and they just throw it blindly at certain makers, right? This is they heat treat better, so everything that I think is applicable to this company right then and there, and I'm not going to ask any other questions, right?
Here's what I think is the best solution for steel choices, right? Instead of like hitching your wagon to a steel as a maker, which I understand there are costs associated with using multiple and all that, right? But like Demco is a great example. On the 8020, which I own and love the 8020.
Yeah.
I specifically wanted one in 3V because that is a bruiser of a knife. Right. And 3V is a very toughness focused steel. But then I've seen other people like try to defend not so great heat treats. But here's a good example. On 4V, I've seen some people say, well, they ran it soft for toughness. Okay, 3V exists. So why in the world would you pick 4V which is basically the brother steel, the 3V, but is the edge retention focused one, and then run it soft to be toughness focused, which is what 3V steel does. Like,
Yeah.
why don't we just pick for the use case the steel that makes the most sense, figure out
Right.
the heat treat on it, and use that and tailor the steel to the use case or the use case to the steel, instead of like this mythos that people put over heat treat and like, oh, well, they use that steel, but oh, they nail that steel. It's like, use the right steel and nail that one. I'm tired of that logic.
The attribute that, like, the original idea, because there's always an original concept for a steel. Like, I think, for example, S110V was created for use in like mass food processing, I believe, because it has, and maybe it was S90V or S110V or maybe both.
Sounds
But
right.
it wasn't originally designed as a folding knife steel. It was designed to be used by machines who are like, I mean, in my head, I just imagine like a bunch of carrots. But
The potato like chopper at In-N-Out.
Right. Yeah. But it's got a decent amount of corrosion resistance. It's a stainless steel. It's no Van X. It's not even M390, but a good amount of corrosion resistance, but unbelievable potential edge retention considering what it's going to be cutting, right? Mm-hmm. So in that specific, I mean, it's made to do that. So they're going to want to heat treat it to bring out those attributes, or specifically the heat treat's going to affect edge retention. You're going to want to maximize those attributes, right? You throw it in a pocket knife, it's interesting, but it's a little less potent as a pocket knife than it is specifically what it was designed for. But if you ran that soft, what the hell? Like,
what's the point?
It doesn't make any sense. You're killing the purpose of it, right? So in some situations, I can understand why they might, depending on what it's meant to be used for. But if the composition is meant to yield some attribute that's affected by the heat treat, it's meant to be great. Don't pull away from it. If you're going to do that, then choose a different steel that's more well-rounded for the application, right?
Yeah.
So
part of what I love, one of the things that I find the best about there's a lot of people who love or hate Spyderco. I'm a Spyderco fanboy. I love the PM2, the Para 3, like those flagship knives in particular. I get a big kick out of, and I'm a moderator in the Millie Club on Facebook. Like, I like that world of knives, and part of why I love it is because the PM2 is already a pretty broad use case knife. Like, it fits a lot of people's applications. I've carried it outdoors a ton. I've carried it in office situations, like, and it feels kind of at home in a variety of places for its price point. I just think it's a great option. But for take away from whatever you have against sprints and exclusives, think about the positive aspect of it, that I have a 10V PM2, which for me, I don't have any other folders in 10V, and I already love the platform. And there are a sea of steel choices, especially if you're paying attention and if you're into that niche, you can catch it on drops and not pay over on secondary, which has its own frustrations. But the utility of having a single knife that people can choose what steel is best for me, and then they can have the knife, if they like it, in a whole variety of steels. You can have one in 3V if you want a really tough one. You can have one in 10V if you want a lot of edge retention and a little bit of toughness. You can get S110V if screw toughness, I just want edge retention. Like, Maximet, there's all these options, and Maximet performs very differently than Crewwear does. But you can have either one, and if you like the knife, you could have both, one for each different type of use case. And I dig that, and I wish more companies, even if they weren't going to do so many steels, which is fair, that's too many steels on the PM2 probably at this point. But if you've got a model like the Sabenza, for example, like, instead of just S35 or now S45 that they're moving to, like, why not offer one that's toughness focused and one that's edge retention focused? And then you serve both of those people instead of having one that's just down the middle. I don't deal well with things that are down the middle because I want things to be focused. So yeah, I guess that's just kind of the way I see it at this point.
But you're right though. It's because, while we were kind of joking about 80% of us using our knives for simple things, still there's a massive variety of simple things that you can do with your knives, where choosing a steel that might be slightly overkill in some circumstances, it might be perfect for that whatever you're doing with your knife, and it might be just once or twice a month, but maybe if you're more likely to do that thing, then having that steel in your knife might be a little bit better, right? I mean, if you do treat your knives a little bit more like tools that they aren't, then you probably should, even if you're just doing simple things, you probably should have a steel that has better toughness, right? You
Yep.
don't want something that's really hard and really brittle.
If you're prying and twisting and
don't buy it. Don't buy a PM2 and S110V if you're going to be screwing stuff in. And you know, the PM2 sucks, especially the ones in S110V. I tried to screw in trying to screw the cover plate back on an outlet, and I broke the tip. Well, you're dumb.
Yes, you did.
First of all, it's a knife, but if you were going to do that, you probably want a more robust tip, and it should probably be a much tougher steel, right? And once anybody buys their knives, as much as we preach and say you should or shouldn't use knives for certain things, if you buy it and it's yours, do whatever you want with it, right? But you should, no matter how unlikely it is for you to use your knife for this or that, if there's a chance you're going to do it, you should probably buy the appropriate steel, right? I mean, like that's, the multi-directional teeter-totter thing. But I love that Spyderco, like you said, offers same models in so many. We need to get the Shaman caught up. But
it's getting there.
I really want to see a Maximate Shaman, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. And I want to see, some other crazy stuff. Have they done a 3V? They did a 4V Shaman. They did a 3V Shaman?
There's been a couple in crew wear and now in Z wear, because the Micarta ones that were sprints were crew wear and Z wear, and then the Knife Joker exclusive was coated crew wear with the like dark green handles. I don't think there's been a 3v1 yet, but it would make a lot of sense. I would think. There's been Rex 45. There's been M4 from Blade HQ. There's been S90V, the carbon fiber S90V. That was one of the first sprints. Yeah, there's been a few, but compared to many knives, that's a lot already. But compared to the PM2 and Para 3, that's like nothing.
I know. So speaking of Rex 45, I did there's an old Instagram post where I spent 2.5 hours in my garage breaking down cardboard boxes with a Rex 45 Shaman. Oh my gosh, I really like Rex 45.
My Shaman is Rex 45 right now. I love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. And if you have to worry about corrosion, if you're working on a fishing boat, you don't want Rex 45. But out here, oh my gosh, it's fantastic. A lot of these, I found that I used to have this love. I used to put M390 20CV 204P up on a pedestal. That's major emphasis on corrosion resistance combined with good edge retention, right? Makes sense for a lot of people. There's still a part of my brain that kind of celebrates it in an unnecessary way.
Yeah.
But out here, I've realized I don't really need those stainless qualities. They're interesting. It's an interesting element of a pocket knife, but I don't need them as much. And a lot of these steels, like S110V, M390, even S90V. Well, S90V I think is even less tough than M390. Anyways, I appreciate extra toughness, and I'll sacrifice corrosion resistance. I don't need it to be so hard. Like, I like to have that high edge retention, but I want it combined with edge stability and toughness. And if I need to, I'll gladly sacrifice corrosion resistance in the composition to get it, because it makes more sense. It's easier to sharpen. I have a better experience sharpening M4, even though it's limited. Better experience sharpening M4 than M390 because it seems to chip less. The edge wants to roll instead of chip, and it's easier to get it back to the way that it was. And when heat treated properly, it performs similarly in terms of edge retention to M390. So I appreciate that attribute a little bit more,
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I can tell you're pretty big on sharpening and ease of sharpening. Something that I have grappled with, and I want your opinion because I think this will be interesting coming from you.
Okay.
There are performance metrics of steel, right? And typically when you look at, like, Blade HQ is a resource a lot of people go to. There are basically 4 ways to value or to rank how high performing a steel is. So you have edge retention, toughness, corrosion resistance, and then they put ease of sharpening on that list. I've made the argument, and I feel like maybe I'm alone here, but I don't see ease of sharpening as a performance metric. I see it more as like a cost of ownership type of thing. Like if I'm buying a high performance car, how expensive that car is to maintain or how frequently I have to maintain it has nothing to do with how fast it goes around a track when it's at a track day, right?
Right.
So I see it as like a maintenance thing, and it's worth considering. I'm not saying it shouldn't be on the chart, but everybody always talks about it like it's a performance metric, and I struggle with that. Maybe part of that, though, is that I have so many knives and so many of them are such great steels that I very rarely even need to sharpen. And when I do, I've got diamond plates on a KME, and it's like I haven't met a steel yet that I've been incapable of sharpening. But do you see that? Like, is that a performance metric to you, or is it just a consideration that needs to be made when you're picking a steel, or how do you view that? Because some people have really pushed me back on it, and I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I just maybe look at it different.
It's weird. I don't consider it a performance metric. It's weird because like some steels can be, like it's how easy they are to sharpen, and how I kind of throw it in there with I hate chips. I hate sharpening chips. A roll is much easier to, and I don't have like excessive like years and years and years of experience sharpening. The last 2.5 years I've been using a KME. I use it periodically. I have so many knives that it takes a while for any of them to get dulled. I really don't like to sharpen. I only do it when I need to, right? So when it comes down to sharpening, I want that process to take as little time as possible. So I've come to favor some of these tougher steels with better edge stability, right? So I can get them back, especially the ones that have great edge retention. If I can, if it takes me 20 to 30 minutes to sharpen a blade steel and I can get months of use out of it without having to sharpen it again based on my own usage habits, I consider it, a fairly easy to sharpen knife. If I'm spending twice the amount of time sharpening certain steel because it is chippy, and then it's getting roughly the same level of performance, then it's less likely to carry. So is it a performance out? Should it be considered amidst that pyramid, right? No, it's just time spent getting it back on the road, right? How long does it take the pit crew to get the tires and crap back on it, right? That's, not so much a performance. It's just the tires are going to wear. So
Yeah.
does it come with a good pit crew, or does it come with, a guy who's asleep, a guy who's hammered, and you know what I mean? Like you want to get it back on the road and going as quickly as possible. Unless you just some people view sharpening as like a therapeutic thing. They'll go out of their way to use like the lapping films, and it'll be like this big. No, I want it to get sharp, and I want it to be ready to go and get it back out there. So yeah, it is weird that people throw it in. And now that I'm thinking about it, when I do my reviews, I go, toughness, edge retention, corrosion resistance, and ease of sharpening, as if it is part of that.
Right. Well, everyone talks about it like it's the same family of.
Yeah. I've never really thought about it, but it's not. I mean, and it's so weird how it's never perfectly consistent when you're taking away or adding things to a composition, right? It's all bound to this pyramid of performance attributes. The ease of sharpening element is not perfectly consistent. It's not like if this, then that. No, there's a lot of other elements to consider there, so it's funny. I've never thought about that, but you're right. Not really a performance element.
I think like I'm definitely not arguing at all that it's not very important information making a buying decision. What irks me is like the language of like, these are the 4 tiers of performance. And I'm like, is it though? Because maybe it's my like automotive focused brain where I'm like, I mean, how many days it's in the shop or how much it costs to get a replacement bulb for this or that doesn't dictate how fast the car is or its braking distance, or like these things are what make a car fast or slow around a track. And those are performance. The other stuff is like, you need to know it if you're going to buy one, but we're not calling it performance, like BMW isn't like selling their M cars by saying, and they're easy to maintain. That's not it. Like they're selling them as high performance.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you're exactly right. I think you could probably hair split and say that the process is a necessary catalyst to performance.
Sure.
So, I don't think so. It's not the same thing. Like because the other parts, are the composition, like measurable performance within the composition, right?
Yeah.
It's just that's how it's going to be. Like there's a a certain, but then again, sharp. I
It's
don't think
related.
it's quite on the same level. It's hard
Yeah.
to. It's weird. Like my brain's like ping ponging it. But
Something to
no,
chew on, I guess.
yeah.
So
Uh,
we're already, it's been 2 hours and 40 minutes. I do need to pull the in just a
I'm
minute.
never gonna release this long. This is fun.
That's good. That means we need to do another one because there's a lot more that we could talk about, I'm sure. Before we kind of close out, and I mean it, we should do another one of these soon because it's been a lot of fun. Where can people find you? Multiple platforms, because if they're watching on YouTube, this is live right now, but later it'll be published and I'll put all your links down below. But if they're listening, because this goes on podcast platforms and all that, where can people find Metal Complex?
You can find me on YouTube, Metal Complex, spelled just like it sounds. You can find me on Instagram at metal_complex. And then I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/Metal Complex, which I'm sure the people in the chat will joke and say that I make them aware of that in literally every single upload. But yeah, those are the 3 main places you can find me.
So YouTube, Instagram, Patreon. And here's a parting question for you. I have a Patreon, but I never promote it. I probably should, but it's like that thing where I can't bring myself to say, please like and subscribe. It just, for me, it feels wrong.
Sure.
But for you on Patreon, something I need to be better at is making myself feel like it's worth it for my patrons to be in there. You do there's specific things that people get by being a Patreon patron. Right. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so how have you structured that? Selfishly, I want to know so that I can be better at it.
Yeah, sure. So that's the area where I make myself incredibly available to feedback for not only the channel, but like that specific area. And the people, if there's anybody in here who is a patron of mine, then they'll tell you that I'm extremely active there, and I try to say, hey, what type of stuff do you guys want to see here? What type of stuff do you guys want to see on YouTube? And I let them affect, a lot of it, because these are people who are invested and really like they care enough that they want to give something to you. So it's that, but it's also a consistent type of exclusive content. I'm always trying to upload something there to Patreon, do something fun. I've got exclusive. It's basically little things that are part of the channel. It sounds lame, but we've built this whole thing around like different skins on the stickers that I do, and I make them special to patrons, and I do little short runs, and I just give them away, and we just do fun stuff like that. Sometimes I give away knives there. Sometimes I sell when I sell my own personal knives. No matter how rare they are, no matter how valuable they are, I take whatever they were originally worth brand new, and I basically cut the price in half. And I'm open with my patrons. I say, this money is going to get used to purchase things that will generate new content. And you're helping with that, but at the same time, you're getting a good deal on something that maybe is kind of hard to get. A combination of all that stuff, basically, it's just being consistent and making sure that you're, readily open to accept the thoughts and criticisms of these people who care enough to support you and like really be involved with the channel. And it's done really well. And I don't want to speak for all my patrons, but I assume that they're happy because they stick around. A lot of them have been there since the day that I opened Patreon, and I enjoy it too. I kind of like that more personal, it's a smaller community there than on YouTube, so it's kind of fun, and everybody seems to get along with each other. I think it's a bad idea to just leave a Patreon open and never do anything with it. And It's easy. I think that's obvious, but it seems like there are some people do run their Patreon that way. I think it's a better idea to be there and be interactive and do fun things that only happen there.
Yeah.
So
no, I need to be way better at it. I haven't made it a total ghost town, but I have not been nearly as good as I should be. So I need to work on that.
If you want to look at the way that mine's structured and just absolutely rip it off, you're welcome to.
I'm too proud to rip off anybody. It's not the way my brain works. But
okay.
Killer, man. So Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, those are your big ones. Anything else that people need to know about you before we call it a deal on this one?
Man, if this is your first time hearing me talk, my content is very, very similar to how we've interacted here today, minus the swearing. I like to say what I think, and I'm not always right. I definitely don't know everything, but I think knife collecting, knife using, knife enthusiasm is fun and enjoyable. And I think that, it doesn't really matter who you are or your reasons for wanting to enjoy it. I think that, it's like we were talking about earlier, the more the merrier. There's no absolute right or wrong in this world, and it's fun. It's fun to have fun with it and not take it too seriously, just seriously enough. That was very broad and generic, but I hope that makes sense.
It's kind of like I don't know if you watch Garand Thumb, but it's kind of like at the end when he has somebody on, he asks them for like a piece of dad advice. I feel like we just got your dad advice.
Yeah, you got a real cryptic dad response. It's like when you ask dad a serious life question, but he's grilling,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't really look back at you. He answers it while flipping the burger patties, right? And it's
Yep.
very like broad, and it's meant to like make you think and apply it,
Mm-hmm.
however you see fit in the moment.
I dig it.
Yeah.
Metal Daddy in the chat. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Genuinely, I hope we do this again soon. Hopefully, it
Yes.
was fun enough that you'll accept. And
Yes.
yeah, I'll make sure you get a prototype of my knife to check out soon. We'll make that happen.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you,
All
everybody,
right.
for listening. This has been fun.
Cool, man. Thanks. Appreciate it.